Morning, glory, America. Long, long time. That's how long I'm going to love Shane Bieber for. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway, and I got to tell you, Shane Bieber, he's a phenom. He went 9 innings last night for the Indians, 11 strikeouts. He extended his streak to 15 starts with at least 8 strikeouts, tying Pedro Martinez and Randy Johnson for the third longest such in Major League Baseball. Only Martinez with 16 and Randy Johnson with 17 have longer streaks with at least 8 punchouts. Joe Noga in Cleveland. ESPN Stats records his 15th straight game with at least 8 strikeout ties Corey Kluber for the largest reach in Indians history and his most Ks through 3 appearances of a season since 1893. 1973, Nolan Ryan had 37. In 2018, Garrett Cole had 36. In 2020, Shane Bieber had 35. And in 2021, Shane Bieber had 35. Now, he is such a phenom. He's only 1-1 because the Indians, their hitting is a little behind their pitching at this point. But, of course, Generalissimo is tormenting me in the pre-show by talking to me about how he'll look good in Angel Red in 3 years because we just lost Francisco Lindor to the Mets because the Indians are a small market team with a $50 million payroll, and Steve Cohen owns the Mets, and he can pay for anything he wants. Please, 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 Dolans. I've never gone in for the fact that whole nonsense that you're cheap. You're not cheap. You're a small market team. Go sign him now. Pitchers are much more likely to be aware of the risk to their arms and their legs and their knees and their careers. Sign him for 10 years like the shortstop in San Diego. Sign him, sign him. Don't let him get away. He is Nolan Ryan. Do not let him get away. So I began my day that way, looking at the bet. But let's do the rundown on the news, which is not as good as the Indians news. They had another night of riots in Minnesota last night, and it went very late. About 1,000 protesters, the usual stuff. Police using flashbangs. Protesters throw objects, rocks, frozen water bottles, striking the officers. More flashbangs, riot gas, projectiles. A woman stuck her head out of the apartment and screamed that tear gas was into her home, begging officers to stop. Well, it's not really the officers are not going to stop. Dozens of National Guard trucks and Humvees parked along the street. It's a nightmare in Minnesota, and the Chauvin verdict isn't even coming. And the fatal shooting of Wright on Sunday is just beginning. So the Gophers stayed in for a rough go. President Biden announced all U.S. troops will be out of Afghanistan by September 11th. Now, that's an arbitrary deadline. It's 20 years since the war began. And I don't know, somebody thought there was symmetry in that. They let the comms team decide that one. Jim Inhofe, who is the ranking Republican on armed services, rightly angry about it. Makes no sense. Trump was going to leave a few hundred troops at Bagram, which is what we should do for intelligence purposes, help the Afghan government stay afloat. You can get a few hundred troops out of anywhere. We evacuated al-Assad when word got down that Iranian ballistic missiles were going to hit it after we killed Soleimani. We got people off of Assad in a matter of hours. If we had to get people off of Bagram, we could do it. It's much too important to do this. Symbolism is not national security. Symbolism is empty gestures for dummies. And the Biden team, they're sending a non-official delegation to Taiwan. That's not what we need. We need the end of strategic ambiguity. We need a declaration that ship will be matched with ship, plane with plane, aggression with aggression if Taiwan is threatened by China. But Joe Biden is not going to do any of that. They did do a good thing, credit where credit is due. Biden approved the $23 billion sale of F-35s to the United Arab Emirates that had been agreed upon during the Abraham Accords process as a side collateral agreement. Very important to our little Sparta. General Mattis calls UAE little Sparta, and they are our most reliable ally in the Arab world, and they are absolute made of warrior material, and the F-35s belong there. So Biden took 90 days, but he got it done, and that's good news. Secretary Austin announcing that yesterday. Israel announcing as well they will not retaliate for the attack on one of their ships near the UAE, not by the UAE, but of course by the Iranians. Big news out of England. I love this headline from the Telegraph. Kate could act as peacemaker between William and Harry on day of Prince Philip's funeral. I'm sure that's got you riveted. It doesn't have me riveted. What has me riveted is the idiocy of the FDA and the CDC, and I use that word advisedly. They're good scientists. They're doing their best. They don't know anything about messaging and communication. Pausing the J&J COVID-19 vaccine is a magnitude 10 disaster in terms of getting people to take vaccines. They just don't. I work with them. I worked with Team Biden with Andy Slavitt to push vaccine. I got vaccinated. Fetching Monsieur got vaccinated. You should get vaccinated. Working against the anti-vaxxers. Working against, does it change my DNA? I run into it in Denver. I run into it in California. I work with people. It's safe. It's safer than walking down the street. If you drive on the 405, you're more at risk than you are. If you're on the Beltway right now, listening to me going to work in D.C., you're at more risk right now than you would be from taking 3 of the vaccines. So they get 6 blood clots or 7 blood clots out of 7 million, and they pause it. And the only thing people hear is dangerous vaccine. It's like it's as though these scientists are so narrow gauge, so blinkered to the realities of the world. They do not know what they are doing, and that's on Joe Biden and the team. That's on Ron Klain. Ron Klain should have known better than this. Dumb. A 1 in a million chance of a blood clot, one of which is fatal, so it's 1 out of 7. And they pause an entire vaccine, and they send. By the way, it's the vaccine that's got to work everywhere in the world that doesn't have refrigeration. It's the best hope for the world, and they just punched it in the nose. On the basis of what? Panic. The risks, if any, are very low, says the New York Times. We know that. You know that. Member of my family in the military got J&J. That's what they're using abroad. And I'm glad they did. I got no doubts about it. You know, just now that they know that 1 out of 7 million people is going to die from it, they're going to make sure that 1 out of 7 million people doesn't die from it. Honest to goodness, their messaging. Just dumb. The good messaging, the Telegraph reporting in Oxford, no, actually it's a U.S. study. Odds of death from coronavirus were 2.49 times greater compared to people who took 150 minutes of exercise a week versus the inactive. Exercise is the most important anti-COVID thing you can do. Exercise, 150 minutes a week. So it's 30 minutes a day, Monday through Friday. You take the weekends off, but you actually have to do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the weekends. Just walk for 30 minutes a day, and you've got 2.49 times greater compared to people of not dying from COVID. By the way, the death numbers, Great Britain is leading the way here. A quarter of COVID deaths were not caused by the virus. They're going back now and looking now that the crisis is passing. And up to half of the people allegedly hospitalized for COVID are not hospitalized for COVID. They're hospitalized for other things, which is vastly inflated. We knew that. We knew it all along, but it's still a very dangerous disease. Senate is going to pass a bipartisan measure aimed at hate crimes, including those aimed at Asian Americans. Good on them. Yu Chang, who's the first baseman for the Indians and threw an error, lost the game 2 nights ago. Errors are part of baseball, as Tito Francona said, and he got hit with all this anti-Asian bigotry online. Gosh, what knuckleheads there are out there. Federal appeals court upheld Ohio's Down syndrome abortion law. That's going to the Supreme Court. When I come back, I'm going to talk about inflation because story after story about inflation, and you need to be aware of that. But you really need to be aware that the top bidder for the Tribune newspapers is a Swiss billionaire named Wyss, W-Y-S-S. And it turns out Mr. Wyss and a bunch of other people are running an octopus-like group of, I've never been a big conspiracy theorist that George Soros is behind everything. But between the Hub Project, which he supports, and Soros, and now corporate America, 100 corporations trying to hammerjack Republicans who believe in voting integrity, I'm beginning to believe the left doesn't want to have a debate. The left wants to end the debate. and they're doing so any means that they can. And we have to fight back against that and fight for free speech. Go sign the petition to support Georgia at HughHewitt.com. Do it right now. The petition to stand with Georgia is at HughHewitt.com. I'll be right back.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Holding in my baby brown libertarian fingers an article from the Daily Mail. This is the headline. Outgoing CNN anchor Brooke Baldwin rails against network about lack of women in leadership, saying, quote, the most influential and highest paid anchors are men, close quote, just months after she was temporarily taken off the air and replaced by Jake Tapper. And it goes on and talks about how she's expected to leave this month. And she gave an interview with Ms. Magazine. I had no idea Ms. Magazine was still being published. Is it still being published? Wow. I should start subscribing. I had no idea. Ms. Magazine, she said, quote, the most influential anchors on our network, the highest paid, are men. My bosses, my executives, are men. The person who oversees CNN Dayside is a man. And my executive producer for 10 years is a man. So I've been surrounded by a lot of men. End of quote. And your complaint is that they smell bad, that they don't shower, they don't put the toilet seat down. What's your complaint? Quote, I know personally I fight for women's stories, but I get told no a lot, and I still manage to do it. End of quote. There's a lot more I need to do outside the walls of this place, close quote. So she's leaving CNN, says CNN is sexist, the same organization that for 4 years referred to President Donald Trump as sexist.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
Unlike the history of the United States, we now are guided by the frightened. The frightened make policy. That's the difference. It's the opposite of the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. All right, Joseph in Baltimore, Maryland. Hello.
Hey, Dennis.
Hi.
You admitted on Tuesday that Israel's done the exact opposite of everything you recommended.
Right.
They've had 6,000 deaths. They have 36 times fewer people. 36 times 6,000 is 220,000. They have almost a third the number of deaths we have. From which I would draw the conclusion that everything you recommended is wrong.
Well, how do you answer this? I looked it up, seeing your call. I looked up the list of countries. 150 countries have fewer deaths per million than Israel. So why do you pick Israel versus the U.S. and not Israel versus the 150 countries, 150 that did better than Israel and didn't do what Israel did?
Well, your recommendations were for the
Wait, please answer my question. I thought I answered yours. You compare Israel only to the U.S. I compare Israel to all other countries. I think that that's more scientifically...
Because you've admitted yourself that countries that are homogenous, like Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea, aren't comparable. You don't compare the United States to South Korea. Israel's
right, but I didn't. I said 150 countries. They're not all homogenous. Okay, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
They gave away all their hydroxychloroquine. They shut down 3 times, and they have one-third the number of deaths we do.
Right, and they would have had a lot fewer deaths had they allowed ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
He's made a very big deal about ghost guns. Homemade guns, as you said, that cannot be traced. I didn't realize there was a rash of ghost guns used in these high-profile mass killings that Biden referenced. Are they? Are these massacres in Charleston and in Colorado and all these terrible scenes Are those all with people who made their guns at home?
No, Mike, you're right. These aren't people.
Welcome back, America, my friends. Never mind. I want to talk a little bit about inflation. I love the Moody Blues, but those were the old days. The inflation news is not good. Yesterday, the Consumer Price Index was announced to have risen 2.6% in the year ending in March. All right, so inflation accelerated in March due to strengthening economy, rising energy prices. And in the New York Times, there's a story by Jim Tankersley. The Biden administration is quietly obsessing over inflation. And Janet Yellen says, oh, no, nothing to see here, says Secretary Yellen. Don't worry about it. And Jerome Powell at the Fed said, no, nothing to see here. Well, look, there isn't an economist in the world who didn't I made it through Act 10 in 1974, and that's the extent of my economics training, Otto Eckstein and all that stuff. But I know if you print $4 trillion, you're at risk. And when you've done 6, you're really at risk. And now they want to do another trillion. They said, maybe we'll slow the entry of that money into the economy. It's crazy throwing this kind of money around when the economy is fine and getting better. It wasn't fine a year ago. Targeted relief at small businesses made sense. Throwing trillions of dollars at the states makes no sense. I hope they do things that are smart with it. The money's spent already. Don't blow it. Endow stuff like homelessness. But U.S. rents rose for the first time in 8 months in March. The median rent across 50 metropolitan areas increased 1.1% to $1,463 a month. NASDAQ set a reference price for their Coinbase listing at $250 a share. The best Amazon analyst out there, Brent Thill, he's with Jefferies. And he came out yesterday and said Amazon, which is trading this morning at around $4,000 a share. Around $3,400 a share, not $4,000. $4,000 a share was the old price mark. So Phil comes out yesterday and says, it's really a $5,700 a share company when you break it down into its component parts. Now, Jeffrey's price target for Amazon remains $4,000 a share. It's at $3,400 a share at the close yesterday. And if it goes to $5,700, that's real value. That doesn't even count inflation. When you add inflation in, I don't know what it's going to do. But you know what you can do? You can buy some gold. I own Amazon, and I own gold, and I own my house. And so I'm protected against real estate, against inflation, because I have real estate, gold, and stock. I am not a big cash person. I don't believe in CDs. CDs are crush and destroy this money because of inflation. CD stands for crush and destroy my cash. Now, do not allow your cash to be crushed and destroyed. Turn it into gold, or turn it into real estate, or turn it into Amazon or another stock that you know. Only buy what you know. Skip the exotic stuff. Stay away from Reddit boards and GameStop and get rich quick schemes. Doesn't work. Dollar cost averaging works. The same amount of money every month in a index fund or a good stock like Amazon or gold. Now, I buy my gold from Birch Gold, HughGold.com. They're a great sponsor of this show. I tell you that every day when I do my market report, which comes along right now, but I want to emphasize it's at $1,746 an ounce this morning. It was at $1,700 2 weeks ago. It's been as high during a panic in the market last year. It got up to $2,000. I never look at what the price is when I buy. I buy at the same time every year. And Birch Gold, I just buy the real stuff and I put it in the safety deposit box. Some of you want to roll over some in your IRA. You haven't got money lying around. You can't afford to buy an ounce of gold here or there, but you do have a retirement account. You want to diversify. You go to HughGold.com and they will help you roll over 10%. That's what I recommend. Some people want to do more, but it's up to you. They'll send you the free information kit. But it is the inflation buster. Now, the 10-year dropped yesterday to 1.623. Short term, this is not a problem. Long term, they are obsessing over inflation in the Biden White House. Birch Gold will even send you a free home safe if you want to get a purchase going now. But yesterday, the Dow was up 68 points. The NASDAQ was up 146 points. The S&P was up 13 points. Everything is up abroad this morning. I don't know what's going to happen here today, but I know if you want gold, you go to hughgold.com or text my name, Hugh, to 474747. Come right back.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Now, on the Mike Gallagher Show.
He's made a very big deal about ghost guns, homemade guns, as you said, that cannot be traced. I didn't realize there was a rash of ghost guns used in these high-profile mass killings that Biden referenced. Are these massacres in Charleston and in Colorado and all these terrible scenes? Are those all with people who made their guns at home?
No, Mike, you're right. These aren't people who have produced their own firearms in their own homes. We're talking about, in many of these instances, are failures of people to either enact on the laws that are available to them or the authorities who failed to take action when they were supposed to. So if we look at the most recent murders in Boulder, Colorado, we see that Colorado already has red flag laws. We see that the family was already concerned about the mental disturbance of the individual who's accused of these crimes, to the point where they actually took the firearm away from him at one point, and he obviously got that back and committed his heinous crimes. But they could have reached out and they could have used the red flag laws available to them there, and they didn't. We look at the Pulse nightclub shootings. In fact, the FBI knew about that and they didn't act. In fact, that was a terror attack and was not just an indiscriminate killing at a nightclub. If we look at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, we know that the FBI was warned twice. We know that the city, state, and county officials have been warned over 40 times that there was concerns with this individual, and they never acted upon those. So what we're talking about is a failure of the system to actually work in the way it's supposed to, because people were either too afraid or because authorities didn't act when they were warned to. This is not an issue of so-called ghost guns. And part of the issue is that these are being conflated a lot of times with firearms that show up at a crime scene with the serial numbers obliterated.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
You see, the people that perpetually want more power for themselves, they crisis hop. They hop from one crisis to the other. The environmental crisis, the Chinese coronavirus crisis. A crisis allows you to justify a power grab. There's nothing quite like a crisis that makes you feel more self-important and act like a totalitarian. A crisis generally means that the public will give up their freedoms and liberties. There's something even deeper going on here, though. As the CDC director says racism is a serious public health threat, they are now blending two of their most effective strategies. The fact that Americans will not question the science when it comes from anything from the CDC, despite the fact the CDC has lied to you about basically everything over the last year. The CDC has been wrong about almost everything, contributing to a serious mental health crisis, a suicide epidemic, alcoholism, drug usage, self-worth issues with young people, 40% of small businesses being closed, and the lockdowns did nothing. Let me say that again. The lockdowns did nothing to actually improve the well-being of our country. But the CDC now knows that Americans would rather be safe than free, and that safetyism is the predominant viewpoint in America. And they also know that Americans will not challenge this idea that America is systemically racist. Just won't.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Why is it that we have to wait is this so often the case for a British tabloid newspaper to report the story of Hunter Biden for anybody to take notice?
Because our media just aren't interested. Our media want to protect the Bidens. They want to protect liberals, most of the media, and they just aren't. They're not honest brokers, right?
Welcome back. I can't stop singing along either. I love Fight for Fighting. And John is a friend, John Andrazik. And I can't wait to get him back on the road. I think he plays in Northern Virginia often. He plays at the Coach House in Southern California often. Whenever John is on the road, I try and go see him. I was thinking about John last night. I've got Admiral McRaven coming up at the end of the show, and it turns out Admiral McRaven and I have a friend in common, Gary Sinise, whom John Andrazik introduced me to. And so he was just on my mind last night. But so was the fact that Americans are in for a great year. It's a great year ahead. It's got nothing to do with politics. It's got a lot to do with an economy that reopens, pent-up demand, growth, happiness, reunion with family, but not always happy, because some people aren't going to be there because a lot of people died who didn't need to die. And that's why yesterday's fiasco on the messaging makes me crazy. We spend a year getting ready for vaccines. A year. We break all land speed records. We being every American who pays taxes paid for Operation Warp Speed that Donald Trump started and Joe Biden is continuing. And it's a great triumph of American science. And by the way, free world science. It's also succeeded in the United Kingdom with AstraZeneca. There are tiny, tiny bits of risk involved with the AstraZeneca and the J&J vaccine. Nothing even remotely as dangerous as driving a car. 12 Americans per 100,000 die in car crashes every year. You're much more likely to die in a car crash than you are. By an order of magnitude. We have trouble assessing risk, especially scientists at the CDC and the FDA. And then they try and get President Biden to undo the damage yesterday in an oval spray. Listen to this. Cut number 3. This is mangling the word salad and spilling it on the floor. Cut number 3.
My message to the American people on the vaccine is, I told you all, I made sure we have 600 million doses of the mRNA, not of either Johnson & Johnson and or AstraZeneca. So there's enough vaccine that is basically 100% unquestionable for every single solitary American. Thank you.
Okay, that makes no sense at all, and everyone laughed at him, but I'm not laughing because I'm crying. It takes years to get a messaging campaign together. All of the vaccines are safe. They all work. Everybody in the world needs to get them. Everybody needs to get them. We cannot overplay risk. The virus is real. It will kill you if you're out of shape. The big story of the day, ReliefFactor.com should have paid for this study, but they didn't. All right, ReliefFactor.com is a sponsor of this show. I talk about them at the end of this segment every day, but this Telegraph story, best newspaper in Great Britain. Consistent inactivity more than doubles odds of COVID hospitalization, study suggests. Odds of death from coronavirus 2.49 times greater compared to people who took 150 minutes of exercise a week. You've got to be active. Tim Cook of Apple, and one of the few things I've agreed with, inactivity will be the new cancer in the next century. We will know that. And that's why you just got to slog. You got to get out there and trundle, even if you're old. And ReliefFactor.com makes that possible. And you also got to get vaccines. These are easy things to message on. Easy things to message on. But they don't know how to message in the Democratic Party unless it's messages of fear and messages of division. I message hope. That's what I message. I'm all about hope. I'm all about the summer we're going to have. Gonna flip the lid on the best hot grill in Virginia on the weekend. The best hot grill has been in winter hibernation. I haven't turned on since I've been back yet. I've got to get the right steaks. I got to get ready to go. Maybe I'll go get an Omaha steak somewhere. I don't know. A Best Hot Grill is ready to go, and had the Best Hot Grill heaters installed in California, so I can spend all winter in California, which isn't really winter because I'm from Ohio, outdoors with the Best Hot Grill heaters, and but the Best Hot Grill is ready to go. I am ready to go and enjoy the summer. It is just beautiful in Virginia. A little bit chilly yesterday, but great to get out there and walk around. But then there is one downside to Virginia. I got an email last night from a friend in the government. They put in an offer on a house, double digit over the offer. Okay, 5 figures more than the listing price. Didn't get the house. That's Virginia right now. That's why Andrew and Todd, who do not pay for me to tell you this, right? They're a sponsor of other segments in different hours. This is a freebie. They have lined up a realtor network. All right, like Vivian Armstrong in Nashville, Tennessee, and J.C. Olson in L.A., and Dave Stoll, and Stephanie DeWam, and Mark Elmasry, Lori Robnett in Orange County, Dennis and Kathy, I guess it's Catherine, Dennis and Catherine Culloden in Phoenix, Arizona, Ed Krause in Big Bear, Terry Bortnick. I always get that wrong. It's not Botnick. Bortnick. Terry Bortnick in Colorado. Ryan Adams in Houston, Texas. Melanie Griffin in North Texas. Gordon Wood in Old Town Alexandria. And I add, my friends, Tracy Cousineau in Atlanta, John Leahy inside the Beltway. There are realtors out there that know how to get you a house before it hits the market. You got to go out there and do it. But the one thing you need in your hands is a pre-qualification letter from Andrew and Todd. And by the way, they're doing jumbo loans again for what, the lending world has figured out. They really didn't want to do jumbos during March of last year through the crisis. They had no idea what was going to happen in the credit market. So they just withdrew. They did conforming loans. They did not do adjustables. They did not do jumbos. They did not do rental properties. Now all the lenders are back. And I went down and saw Andrew and Todd. Last week I was in California at andrewandtodd.com, and they were busy, because everybody in America is trying to buy a house because inflation is coming, and you got to lock on these great rates. And these realtors that they work with, like Lori Robnett in Orange County and Terry Bortnick, I'm sorry, Terry, Bortnick, 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 Melanie Griffin in Texas, Gordon Wood in Old Town. They will get you a house before it gets on the market. If you give them a letter from Andrew and Todd that say, these people can afford this much, you got to go with the pros. Now, here's my other pitch as we come out of this. To live well. I'm going to call American Queen today. I don't even know who runs the account. American Queen does the riverboat. And the riverboats run up and down the Mississippi. They run every great river in the United States. It's got an American Queen riverboat on it somewhere. And I'm going to call up American Queen today, trying to find what is my special. Yeah, again, they're not paying for this. I was just telling you what I was working on. American Queen, it's comehome.aqsc.com/Hugh. That is a long promo. Comehome.aqsc.com/Hugh. Or just go to American Queen and tell them Hugh sent you and ask for the discount, right? They give you a $3,000 credit per stateroom. I'm going to see if they'll let Dwayne and I go float down the Mississippi like Mark Twain. I think that would be a fun radio show. Dwayne, are you up for that? Will you go down the Mississippi with me?
Absolutely, I'll go down the Mississippi.
You have to be on a raft at the back.
No, Mark Twain didn't do a raft. He may have done the paddle boat, but no.
No, I think
we're not doing the Huck Finn.
No, you're going to be the Huck Finn, and I'm going to be Mark Twain. That's the way it's going to go.
I thought you said you wanted to broadcast.
I do.
Well, that ain't going to happen if I'm on a raft.
Well, no, I mean, you could just hook it up. I can't ask for 2 rooms.
Just drag a wire in the river behind?
Yeah, well, you just get it going. I just figured. So the American, but you're game, if they're game?
Oh, yeah.
Because I want to celebrate. All of America's on the move. I mean, they're booking, I think they're now booking 2023 cruises. There might still be room. There better be rooms on the river because you can't get out of the country, right? So what are we going to do? People are driving everywhere all over the country. Now I'm going to tell you the bad news. I talked to the fetching Mrs. Hewitt yesterday about our mutual friend who has spent 18 years in purgatory. And her blessed mother of late memory passed away after a long and difficult battle with cancer. And our friend was with her mom for that whole time. And fetching Mrs. Hewitt sat down with her yesterday and they relived it, talked it through. It's a horrible thing. The only good thing is, apparently, as far as I know, the estate was wrapped up. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I redid our wills during this long period of time. I can do that because I'm a lawyer and I have Law Depot. Do you know about Law Depot? They're not a sponsor. All right, so this is freebie to Law Depot. Do you know about Law Depot? Okay, Law Depot is the greatest thing in the world. We have a rental property in the desert, which was supposed to be our retirement home, but I'm never going to quit. I signed through another 7 years with Salem. And I'm never going to quit, I think. But so I'm never going to use this house. So I had to lease it. And I'm not a real estate lawyer, nor did I stay at a Holiday Inn, nor did I want to hire a real estate lawyer to do a simple lease for a year. So I went online and found Law Depot, looked at it and said, okay, this is pretty good. It was amazing. It was amazing. And they do everything at Law Depot. You got to sign up for a monthly subscription, do a 3-week trial or something like that. But I just keep it around in the event I need a quick legal document, a power of attorney. If you're a lawyer in a large family, get a call like 20 times a year from someone. It's like being a doctor in a large family. I'm sure it's the same thing. With someone, I'm trying to fix my son up with a doctor, so there's a doctor in the family. But I'm the lawyer in the family, so everyone calls me. Now I just go to Law Depot and have them fill out what they need. So we did our wills and we got powers of attorney and medical directives and all the stuff you need. You must have. So as we come out of this, if you haven't done anything at all, nothing. In fact, you've sat around the house and you've been inactive and you've gained weight and you're depressed. And there are a lot of people like that, and I understand it was a tough year. You lost friends and family. Start by walking today, and then start by going to Law Depot, try the free trial, and do a will, a power of attorney, and a medical directive. And then you can say, I got something done this year. You can do it in like a half an hour, and you can then quit the service. I don't. I pay for it every month because like I said, I'm lawyer of the family. But go get that done so you can complete something out of this terrible year in 3 months. As we reemerge, people say, what'd you get done? What happened to you during the shutdown? Well, I did all my estate planning. That meant just about a half hour with Law Depot. Or get a pre-qualification letter from andrewandtodd.com and go out there and get a house and get a realtor and start looking, because you're not going to go to an open house and put an offer down a week later. That's not happening in America. In America right now, you cannot buy a house. It's a frantic, it's a bum's rush. I've been in this business in the real estate lawyering business for 35 years before I retired, and it's happened 3 times, 3 busts, 3 booms. And the rest of the time it's normal. And in a boom, it's crazy when it's a seller's world. And you're begging people to take your money, and you're coming in over, and you're trying to make a no contingency offer, and you're trying to do as much cash down as you can. You got to have that letter from Andrew and Todd. And it doesn't matter if it's a jumbo now, because they're doing jumbos again. But you got to get pre-qualified. You got to get a realtor who knows what they're doing. Go get John Leahy in Delmarva, and D.C. especially, which is crazy. Maryland especially, if it's crazy. Go get Tracy Cousineau in Atlanta. Go get these people I told you about, or ask Andrew and Todd. Vivian Armstrong, my new affiliate down in Sparta, News Talk 1050 in Nashville. All my friends are moving to Nashville. They actually have an Orange County to Nashville flight now because Tennessee's just sucking Californians away. Like Rick Perry used to come with sticky gum on his fingers and take away Californians to Texans. And most of all, start walking today. Get your relief factor now. That relief factor time of the day. Okay, I'm going to be done being a cheerleader and go back to the news after this, because I got to bang on Team Biden for what they did yesterday. But I have got my relief factor. I carry in Kirkman, Resveratrol, and Omega. And I have got my news story about how much better off you are if you are active. Do you see this? If you're watching on YouTube, the Telegraph, I'm holding it up for you. Consistent inactivity more than doubles odds of COVID hospitalization. You know what that means? Sitting on your couch. It's okay to sit on your couch. I'm watching The Mandalorian because I'm the Mandalorian of the radio. And if I had a producer, we'd go out with that music. But I am the Mandalorian of the radio because I take my relief factor and I get my miles in. That's for you, Coach Urban. I know he's listening down in Jacksonville. He's already at work. He's been at work for an hour. I Karen Kirkman, Veritron Omega. 4 miles yesterday, 6 today, 4 tomorrow, Friday off, 10 on Saturday. Got it all planned out. Beltway is fine. It's back. It's spring here. I'm not running in the rain. I am out there because of relieffactor.com. And you need to start today. Start today with relieffactor.com. Trust the Mandalorian of the radio. I'll be right back, America.
On the Dennis Prager Show.
Well, if I don't quote the Journal of the American Medical Association to substantiate a point I make, then people like you call up and say you have no scientific basis. So if I quote them, oh, Dennis, you're not honest because you don't always trust them. But if I don't quote them, Dennis, you have no.
They said ivermectin was worthless.
Yes, and it will be to their everlasting death-creating discredit that they did so. That is what I believe.
They're a fraud. They're a fraud.
In this regard, they have been fraudulent.
When they agree with you, then they're
no. There are areas I have no. Okay, on this, on ivermectin. Okay, that's right. I believe it's fraudulent. That is exactly correct, my friend. That is right. Just as I did on inanimate objects, spreading the disease. I've turned out right. And I live by it. I'm on ivermectin. Okay? An unbelievably safe thing. That these people prefer to put people on ventilators than give them ivermectin early has created in me a contempt for the Journal of the American Medical Association and the New England Journal of Medicine and the medical profession that I never had before. Better to go on a ventilator than take ivermectin early. These people are killing Americans. There are epidemiologists I have had on this show from Yale and elsewhere who believe that hundreds of thousands of Americans are dead because of the medical profession. I agree with that. That's worse than fraud. That's homicide. Get it?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
I will ask for your reaction to the president's promise that nothing he recommended impinges on the Second Amendment.
Well, he has a very, I guess, unique interpretation of what the Second Amendment is then. If we're looking at the infringement upon the Second Amendment and the government trying to pass any kind of restrictions on that, I certainly think there's an argument to be said that if he's passing the idea that you can no longer build a firearm in your home, which has always been legal in America, even before the founding of our nation, you could build a firearm in your home. If he's now saying you can't do that, well, I would argue that we're looking at an infringement upon Second Amendment rights. If he's talking about reclassifying an entire class of pistols under the National Firearms Act, which would make it so you couldn't possess these firearms unless you submit your photo, you submit your fingerprints, you pay a $200 tax stamp, and undergo extensive background checks through the ATF, and then be put on a government watch list simply for exercising your Second Amendment rights. I think that that's called an infringement upon your rights, and I think that's something that the American public needs to reach out to their members of Congress and remind them that they are the check on the
Welcome back, America. If you're a Taliban commander, what are you telling your troops today? I'm talking to Gallagher about this, Representative Gallagher next hour, and then maybe Admiral McRaven, who spent a lot of years in Afghanistan. 20 years. And
look for a real estate network in the fall.
Yeah, it's because you're going to be occupying Kabul again. It is a complete and utter disaster for Afghanistan. Marco Rubio came on to Just the News yesterday and said this, cut number 12.
Well, that was a decision that began under President Trump. And so what they've announced is that they're going to stick with President Trump's decision with regards to Afghanistan. Look, the outcome is going to be a terrible thing. The Taliban, I believe, will eventually take over the country as they were in charge before, and it's not going to be a good outcome. The flip side of it is that I'm not sure what the pathway to a better future in the near term was. And, given all the other needs we're facing around the world, once President Trump made that decision, I think the die was cast in that regard.
Do you think the U.S. has made enough progress on training the Afghan security force?
I mean, I hope so. I don't have a tremendous amount of I hope I'm wrong because of the implications, but I don't have a lot of faith that the current government in Afghanistan will be able to survive or hold on for long. The Taliban, my personal opinion, everything I know is I think the Taliban will have Afghanistan controlled by the Taliban again, and that's not a good outcome, but it's the direction that we're headed, and the previous administration agreed to that. The current administration stuck with it, and that's where we're going.
Previous administration, I think the senator is wrong there, but I could be wrong. I believe the previous administration was going to maintain a few hundred troops at Bagram, which is what you need for strategic fighter assistance, bomber assistance from long-range aircraft and the aircraft that you've got at Bagram. But if you remove every American and you get out of there, skedaddle like South Vietnam, when you skedaddle, up north will not fall. I think there's enough weaponry. The tribal system will come back. It'll be like after the first Afghan civil war, before the Taliban arose, because there's enough weaponry in Afghanistan and money that the warlords will come back. Mitch McConnell on the Senate floor yesterday, cut 14, talks about this.
It was our hasty abandonment of Afghanistan in the 1990s that allowed the Taliban to grab power in a bloody civil war and create the safe haven for terrorism that led to September the 11th, 2001. Conflicts do not simply end. They are won or they are lost. America and American administrations must be in the business of winning.
And we're not in the business of winning. President Trump was also not in the business of winning, but he was also not in the business of losing. And that is an acceptable stalemate, is acceptable. And, Kandahar in the Taliban hand and Kabul in the Free Afghan government hand, in the north in the hands of the ethnic groups of the north. It's a federal system like Kurdistan. We should have carved out of Kurdistan, and we should have, could have, would have. I'm not a soldier, nor did I stay at a Holiday Inn. The best minds in America have been focused on this for 2 decades. They cannot figure out Afghanistan. By the way, that's like the British Empire. By the way, that's like the Russian Empire. By the way, that's like Alexander the Great. As our friend Stephen Pressfield likes to say, it's the tribes, stupid, and we're never going to beat that. Not in my lifetime, probably not in anyone's lifetime listening. It's going to take, well, I fear what's going to happen is that the Chinese Communist Party, which does not have concern about human rights the way we do, and they don't have a media that covers their atrocities like they are committing in Xinjiang province, they're going to move that killing machine west. They're just going to move over their border, and they're just going to start killing and taking and interning and prison camping and moving the machinery of ethnic supremacy forward for the rare earth mineral wealth of Afghanistan, and they will subdue that. Unlike Alexander the Great, the British Empire, the Russian Empire, the American Empire, and we don't have an empire. We have an empire of ideas, not colonies. But just like those 4 failed, China's going to not fail because it's connected to the landmass that is China. They will fail at sea if we are strong enough in our messaging, but we're not winning this round. I don't think the Taliban are going to be stupid enough to let terrorists aim at America again from Afghanistan. They don't want to do this again. And when we're mad, we're mad. But now we're tired and we're going home. And we got to focus on China. And so we got to put our money into the Navy, and we got to pivot away from Afghanistan, the Arab countries. And I get it. But look, let's just be realistic. We're quitting. It's Vietnam 2.0. We're quitting and we're walking away. And it is a disaster. I can't put it any other way. We needed to keep a few hundred troops in Bagram and hold that line and support them with money and weaponry. like we promised to do to the government of South Vietnam in 1975 and did not do when it fell. Jerry Ford was against that. This time the Republicans are just shrugging their shoulders and saying, nothing we can do. Biden wants a symbolic exit by September 11th. That is the dumbest thing. 20 years and lose on the 20th anniversary. That's the 20th anniversary of 9/11, the last man standing in Afghanistan. Wow. I'll be right back, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Don't forget to sign up for the Hugh-niverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.hugh-niverse.com.
So I think we have a great bench. I think we have a lot of really good people that are going to be running for office. The endorsement that I give has a lot to do with a lot of victories, which is a great honor for me because people trust us. And you see what's happening is when I endorse somebody, they're winning. I think we're 128-2 in the last cycle, 128-2. And nobody ever thought a thing like that was possible. When we endorse Congressman, we lost no seats in Congress. We won 15. We were supposed to lose 25, and we ended up winning 15. And we're very close to taking Congress. We're very, very, very close. I think we're going to do a very good job in the House. I think we're going to have a victory. I think we're going to have a victory in a year and a half. The time flies. But we are very much involved in congressional candidates and senatorial candidates. And I think you're going to see a tremendous amount of win. I think also what's happening with respect to, and you know this better than anybody, I know you have it on your show a lot and you're studying it, but the borders, there's never been anything like this. Hundreds of thousands of people are forming right now to come into our country. They think they can do it. They're not checked out. You talk about COVID. There's plenty of other problems that they have. And many of these people are bad people where the countries don't want them. They put them in caravans, and we end up getting murderers and drug dealers and human traffickers and all of these people that the countries, whether it's Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Mexico, in all fairness to Mexico, they're sending people into this country. We've never had anything like it ever before. And all they had to do is just leave the policies. It was not easy to get. I had to win them in court. I went to court. I won tremendous court cases. I had to win many court cases on the wall. The wall was almost complete. It was delayed for 2.5 years because Congress and everybody else was suing us on the wall. I won those cases. The wall was almost complete, and then they said they don't want to complete it. So maybe they will. Who knows? I mean, now I'm hearing they have to complete it. But it was so good. It was all they had to do is leave it the way it was. We had such professionals. We worked with Border Patrol. We worked with ICE. We worked with everybody. We had it at a level that nobody's ever seen before. And in one day, come to America, come through. It was like people, and we're not just talking about Latin America, South America. We have people coming in from Yemen, coming in from the Middle East, coming in from everywhere. It's a disgrace. It's a shame. Very tough for them to stop it now. Not so easy. For them to go and do the deals that I made with Mexico and the 3 countries that I just named, very, very tough for them to do that. At the same time, I think I'm getting the word out really well. We do releases. We release when there's something like today. We did a release on Johnson & Johnson. Why did the FDA? I understand the FDA very well. I'm the one that pushed them. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a vaccine for 3 to 5 years if you had one at all. And so I understand. Why did they have to do that to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine? Because they put a stigma on it by doing what they did. And it's a disgrace. Frankly, it's a disgrace. They want to get publicity or they want to do something. But I know them very well. You wouldn't have had a vaccine for a long time if you ever would have had it. And it's too bad. It's too bad what they did because it makes it difficult, frankly, for that vaccine. And that's, a one-shot vaccine, easier to transport. It's got a lot of, and it had something very interesting. I guess 0 people when they had COVID, 0 people died from it. They had the 0% died from it. That's a big deal. So for them to go and say, we're going to pause it, that's a bad thing when you say you're going to pause it, unless you had a big problem, and they seem to have a very small problem. So it's just, I think it's a shame.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Calling new Biden legislation an infrastructure plan is like calling a shark a dolphin. They both may have dorsal fins, but you mistake one for the other at your peril. Don't be fooled. Only 5% of the bill's spending would actually go for roads and bridges, what normal people think of as infrastructure. Add in items like Amtrak and broadband, and you're still only at 30% of the eye-popping total of $2.3 trillion. And you're supposed to pay for all of this with the biggest tax increase since 1968. Here's what's worse. The bill is actually about leftist social engineering. It would end right to work, something the left hates because it guarantees no one can be forced to join a union or pay union dues in order to hold a job. Ending it offers a rich new source of campaign contributions for Democrats. Calling a shark a dolphin doesn't make it one. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Woodrow Wilson was more concerned with his legacy than what was right for America. He believed the founding fathers were misled. He was the first president in American history to actually philosophically and politically challenge the beliefs of the founding fathers. Woodrow Wilson and Joe Biden are very similar. They care about a radical restructuring and redefinition of America, and I'm going to say something controversial that I have not said publicly. You ready for this? Joe Biden is governing much more radically than Barack Obama. Let me say that again. Joe Biden is governing much more radically. Is that the right way to say it? Much more radically? I guess that's correct. Just doesn't sound right. He's governing more radically than Barack Obama. One of the main reasons is because the people behind him are growing impatient. And they're starting to smell and taste victory. Cut 86, MSNBC analyst, says it himself. Play Cut 86.
Just trying to push forward. So that's a big thing, a paradigm kind of shift. Maybe, I know we've been talking about this for several weeks here, the Roosevelt era to the Reagan era. Are we on the verge of a new activist, progressive era led in an unlikely way by Joe Biden? I think that's not impossible.
Not impossible. MSNBC starting to get excited. Joe Biden is doing more for the anti-American cause in America than any person that has been in office recently.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Well, it's strange, isn't it? It's strange to say, it's Russian disinformation. Then for Hunter Biden in a puff piece interview this week say, it could have, I don't know. I'm not sure if it was mine. It could be Russian disinformation. Boris, if your lawyers are demanding the computers back, doesn't that mean they are Hunter Biden's? Am I crazy there?
You're not crazy, my friend. You're not crazy. You're more rational than Hunter Biden. But you're definitely, you're definitely not crazy. This whole thing is such a joke. Hunter Biden is laughing in the face of Americans with these interviews. Jimmy Kimmel, where he dares to attack Don Jr., while T. Hunter is literally the face of nepotism in America. I mean, this is somebody who's a good-for-nothing failure, who's committed crime after crime. All you have to do is look at the contents of the laptop. And yet he gets to go on CBS this morning. And by the way, talk about collusion, talk about cahoots. Viacom CBS owns Simon & Schuster, which put out the book. And then he goes on CBS to promote it. That's globalism for you in today's economy. Hunter Biden is an affront to the American people. The fact that
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, candidates. Hugh Hewitt, working to repair the damage done by the government yesterday to the vaccine effort. Let me be clear. Get vaccinated. Go get vaccinated. Let me also be clear. If you got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, you're fine. You are fine. I have a family member in the military who received it overseas. I'm glad they did. If you got J&J, if they offered me J&J and I hadn't already been vaccinated, take it tomorrow. 1 in 7 million people died from a rare blood clot. They're not even sure it's J&J. 7 total cases out of 7 million injections of J&J, and they paused it. And they paused it without any thought of messaging. Just a complete and utter fiasco by Team Biden. So they send the president first try, send the president to the Oval and see if he can't straighten out. Swing and a miss, cut number 3.
My message to the American people on the vaccine is, I told you all, I made sure we have 600 million doses of the mRNA, not of either Johnson & Johnson and or AstraZeneca. So there's enough vaccine that is basically 100% unquestionable for every single solitary American. Thank you.
Now, what did that mean? Let me give you an analogy from the past. When I was young and poor and in law school, I would go with Tim Butler, one of my roommates, to the one of those steakhouse chains that really wasn't steak. I'm not sure what they served, but they had giant salad bars. And they had the salad bar screen. I've subsequently learned that the salad bar screen really does not do the public health thing that you want it to do. But in any event, it looked fine. And you could eat as much salad as you want. And so we had no money. So we would go there and buy a cheap steak, which wasn't really steak. I'm not sure what it was. And then we'd eat enough salad to, turn into rabbits. And Butler was a fantastic runner. So he'd eat twice as much as I did. But it was a salad. It was a salad line. You've been through them, right? 1,000 different things. That was Joe Biden in the Oval. A word salad that he spilled, and the dressing went everywhere, and it was a nightmare, and nobody understood what he meant to say. So let's take our second try yesterday after the fiasco by CDC and FDA, which they'd take back if they could. I'm not even sure they coordinated with anybody. Tony Fauci, and I like Dr. Fauci. I'm not one of these people that hate Fauci Club, not me. Had him on. I'd love to have him on again. He is not very good at messaging. He's a terrific man and a great scientist, and if you can spend enough time with him, you can drill down far enough, but nobody ever does, and you can get him to say the right thing. You can finally get through all the hemming and hawing that scientists do and get to the bottom line. Here he is at the White House yesterday, cut number 7.
So when individuals, particularly younger women, who might come into a physician with a particular thrombotic phenomenon, which is things that happen for other reasons all the time, that we want to alert physicians to take a history of a recent vaccination. That would be important. So the pause not only allows us to take a look at the cases and learn more, but it is also a signal out there to help the physicians. A common question, and I'm sure we'll have a number of questions which Jeff and I will be happy to answer to you, but one of the questions that comes up already rather frequently, does this have anything to do with the efficacy of the vaccine? So we know that there have been 6.85 million doses of J&J distributed in the United States thus far. So someone who maybe had it a month or two ago would say, what does this mean for me? It really doesn't mean anything. You're okay, because if you look at the time frame when this occurs, it's pretty tight, from a few days, 6 to 13 days from the time of the vaccination. The next question is one that we're all obviously aware of.
Okay, so a thrombotic. Okay, again, messaging 101. Johnson & Johnson is safe. We want to look for a couple of extra days to make sure it's safe, and so we're not going to use Johnson & Johnson for 2 days, but it won't affect anyone. Then we're going to use it again. That's what they should have said. But they can't say that because the FDA didn't say that, because the FDA's got them tied up with follow the science nonsense. Of course we should follow the science. Science doesn't understand risk. Risk is what we understand intuitively, sometimes poorly. We don't know the risk of inflation very well, but we're pressing ahead and spending trillions of dollars. I think the risk is high. They think the risk is low. So then the question comes, when will it come back on the market? And it's just a disaster. It's a train wreck. Cut number 9.
I want to just ask you very directly, are you ruling out the possibility that the vaccine could be removed from the market? I mean, are you ruling out that, are you expecting it to be re-allowed?
I think it would be premature to comment on that, and that's the reason why the pause was done, so that they could take a good look at it very carefully, look at every different factor. I wouldn't want to speculate.
Stop. Disaster. I don't know if it's ever coming back. What do they think? Do they not understand anything about marketing? I've been doing this for 30 years. I know how to sell stuff. Yes, it's coming back on the market. Yes, it's safe. Why did we do this? Well, we got some super cautious scientists, and they got 1 death in 7 million. And normally, and honestly, what did it do to the rest of the whole COVID crisis theory? If 1 death in 7 million vaccines is enough to stop a vaccination program, is there no common sense in government at all, anywhere, ever? What's the message it sends about vaccine? Completely the wrong message. COVID will kill you. These vaccines work. 7 times in 8 million doses, someone had a thrombotic event that might not actually be related to Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and it might. And they could have said, and we're going to study that. And by the way, we're telling physicians to look for it and monitor it, but we're going to go full speed ahead. They don't know. I could describe it in colorful ways. Donald Trump surfaced yesterday. Former President Trump was on my friend Seb Gorka's show, and he was very blunt about this. He's absolutely right. Cut 21.
So I think we have a great bet. At the same time, I think I'm getting the word out really well. We do releases. We release when there's something like today. We did a release on Johnson & Johnson. Why did the FDA? I understand the FDA very well. I'm the one that pushed them. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a vaccine for 3 to 5 years if you had one at all. And so I understand. Why did they have to do that to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine? Because they put a stigma on it by doing what they did. And it's a disgrace. Frankly, it's a disgrace. They want to get publicity or they want to do something. But I know them very well. You wouldn't have had a vaccine for a long time if you ever would have had it. And it's too bad. It's too bad what they did, because it makes it difficult, frankly, for that vaccine. And that's, a one-shot vaccine, easier to transport. It's got a lot of, and it had something very interesting. I guess 0 people, when they had COVID, 0 people died from it. They had the 0% died from it. That's a big deal. So for them to go and say, we're going to pause it, that's a bad thing when you say you're going to pause it, unless you had a big problem, and they seem to have a very small problem. So it's just, I think it's a shame.
It is a shame. And by the way, I speak Trump, and so I can explain what he meant there. Just like Joe Biden, he got off path towards the end there when he said they've had 0 people. It shows that nobody died who got the J&J vaccine from COVID. Nobody. And some people who got the Pfizer vaccine and I got Pfizer, and some people got Moderna, they have died. And so it's very rare. You got like 90% efficacy, but some people with no one died with Johnson & Johnson. So it's the most efficacious thus far as we know. It's very, very safe. And they paused it. And the former president is right. It's a stigma. And what he's hinted at, I don't know if he could articulate this, is public choice theory about government agencies. Were they looking for publicity? No, they're looking for mission creep. I mean, if the FDA gets the reputation of sitting on drugs for years and years and years that are effective, and they don't let Americans take risks that Americans will take and to stay alive, it's the right to try stuff. If they will actually stop drugs that have a 1 in 7 million fatality rate with an efficacy of 100% against the reason that they are being given, what will Americans think about the FDA? They'll think it's a crazy ass, pardon my French, delete that, please. It's a crazy, crazy bureaucracy. Crazy bureaucracy. And it's public choice theory that agencies act in a way to perpetuate their own mission. And so the only rational explanation I can come up for with the FDA is it was a flex. They flexed their muscles yesterday. We are still the FDA, and we're not going to get rolled over by Trumpists out there that make us approve all these drugs that work. No, we're the CDC. Oh, I pounded the table, and Dwayne's going to be mad at me. We're the doggone CDC, and no one's going to tell us that we can't tell drug manufacturers what to do. So we're just going to pause Johnson & Johnson. Everyone will know we're still here. We'll still at our desk, and they still have to be afraid of us. because we're the FDA and the CDC. And so big pharma, you can't push us around. No more Donald Trumps around here. And they screwed up a national vaccine program to flex. That's Hugh Hewitt's theory, and I'm sticking with it. When we come back, what do you think? 1-800-520-1234. Dumbest thing I have seen done by the government in a year and a half of dumb things and smart things and heroic things. But there's some dumb stuff mixed in there, and this is the dumbest thing. Stay tuned.
On the Dennis Prager Show.
Joseph in Baltimore, Maryland. Hello.
You admitted on Tuesday that Israel's done the exact opposite of everything you recommended.
Right.
They've had 6,000 deaths. They have 36 times fewer people. 36 times 6,000 is 220,000. They have almost a third the number of deaths we have. From which I would draw the conclusion that everything you recommended is wrong.
Well, how do you answer this? I looked it up, seeing your call. I looked up the list of countries. 150 countries have fewer deaths per million than Israel. So why do you pick Israel versus the U.S. and not Israel versus the 150 countries, 150 that did better than Israel and didn't do what Israel did?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
I will ask for your reaction to the president's promise that nothing he recommended impinges on the Second Amendment.
If he's passing the idea that you can no longer build a firearm in your home, which has always been legal in America, even before the founding of our nation, you could build a firearm in your home. If he's now saying you can't do that, well, I would argue that we're looking at an infringement upon Second Amendment rights. If he's talking about reclassifying an entire class of pistols under the National Firearms Act, which would make it so you couldn't possess these firearms unless you submit your photo, you submit your fingerprints, you pay a $200 tax stamp, and undergo extensive background checks through the ATF, and then be put on a government watch list simply for exercising your Second Amendment rights. I think that that's called an infringement.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
We now have a radical, unproven philosophy, critical race theory, that is running our entire government. The CDC director says racism is a serious public health threat. Quote, a growing body of research shows that centuries of racism in this country has had a profound and negative impact on communities of color. That's not true. It's not true. Read Discrimination and Disparities by Thomas Sowell. Just because there is a disparity does not mean that discrimination is to blame. The fatherless epidemic in the black community is a serious public health threat. You want to know what's keeping black people down? It's not racism. It's government programs, failing public schools, Democrat policies, and the lack of fathers in the home.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Why is it that we have to wait? Is this so often the case for a British tabloid newspaper to report the story of Hunter Biden for anybody to take notice?
Because our media just aren't interested. Our media want to protect the Bidens. They want to protect liberals, most of the media, and they just aren't, they're not honest brokers, right? We knew the contents of this laptop in September and October.
Yeah.
This should have been out and out everywhere. But what do we have instead? Instead, we had the New York Post being blocked from Twitter. Instead, we had CNN and others suggesting that Hunter Biden's own laptop that he signed over was somehow Russian disinformation. Absolute nonsense.
Well, it's strange, isn't it? It's strange to say, it's Russian disinformation. Then for Hunter Biden in a puff piece interview this week say, it could have, I don't know, I'm not sure if it was mine. It could be Russian disinformation. Boris, if your lawyers are demanding the computers back, doesn't that mean they are Hunter Bidens? Am I crazy there?
You're not crazy, my friend. You're not crazy. You're more rational than Hunter Biden. But you're definitely, you're definitely not crazy. This whole thing is such a joke. Hunter Biden is laughing in the face of Americans with these interviews.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. Let's go to Terry in Ashtabula, Ohio. Hello, Terry.
You, how are you?
Well, I always love talking to Ashtabula folk. Which part of Ashtabula are you in?
Edgewood.
All right. I know Edgewood very well. You're near the cemetery. Do you know Bunker Hill Road?
Absolutely, you.
That's where Hugh Hewitt came from. Judge Hugh Hewitt lived on Bunker Hill Road. My other grandpa, A.T. Roll, the fire chief, lived out by the old space gas station. Remember they had a flying saucer gas station?
The flying saucer.
Yeah, and then go to Lou's Steakhouse out at Saybrook. I know Ashtabula very, very well. So I spent all my summers at Billow Beach. So be nice to me.
All right. Well, Hugh, I'm afraid you're a lawyer and you're used to using precise language, but you're not being very precise, Hugh. In the first place, okay, you just said a few minutes ago, you said COVID will kill you. Well, as you know, Hugh, there's like a 99.5% chance that COVID will not kill you.
No, COVID will kill you. It is not a certain death, but it is potentially, it's like cancer will kill you if you get cancer and you don't fight it. If you don't treat the disease.
COVID can kill you.
That's okay. I get it. But Terry, the key thing is get the vaccine. Do we agree on that?
Well, wait a minute. Are you
No, wait a minute. I want to know if I'm talking to an anti-vaxxer.
Are you a doctor, Hugh?
Terry, have you been vaccinated?
Are you my doctor?
Terry, I'm not your doctor. Everybody knows that. I'm just asking you a simple question. Have you been vaccinated?
Yes.
Okay, what'd you get?
I got Moderna.
And how'd you feel?
The second shot made me a little queasy the next day.
Yeah, that's what happened to me with Pfizer, and that was fine. So why did you get the shot?
Actually, Hugh, now I really don't know.
Because COVID can kill you. That's why.
There's a small chance that it might.
Yes, it's a small chance that it might, and death is 100% chance that you're dead. And so COVID can kill you.
I might get killed in a car accident.
Don't you just call up to pass that there's nothing going on in Ashtabula? You can't go out and rake the grass or something? You just call up to argue me about can and will?
Yeah, because you're a lawyer. You always brag how you're a lawyer.
I don't brag. I'm a lawyer. I went to Michigan. I have to apologize for it. Now, Terry, be well. Go down there and say hello to Lou's Steakhouse. John in Arizona. Hi, John.
Hey, you. I just got my second shot earlier today.
Good for you, man.
I feel like hell, but I'm still working you.
Oh, well,
I'm a retired federal agent. Let me tell you real quick, and then I'm a retired federal agent, and I was talking to my mentor, who's also a retired federal agent. But he's like 10 years, and I'm in my 60s, so I'm just maybe 1 year younger than you.
Okay,
so
we're in our prime. We're in our prime.
Yeah, we're in our prime, right.
Yep.
So anyhow, I was telling them, I said, I don't know if I like that Hugh Hewitt. He angers me sometimes, and blah, 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 He said, well, he knew your family, and you probably know him, too. So, but I ain't going to tell you, he lives in L.A. now.
Okay.
Somewhere in L.A., in Southern California. But we were talking about you, and I told him, I don't know, that guy gets me mad, I said, sometimes, he's an anti-Trumper, I said.
I am not an anti-Trumper. I saw the president in December. I voted for him twice.
And I'm glad you recognized yesterday, or you put him on the air with what you said today, with what he said. They ruined it, and they're trying to get people to take the vaccination. They're crazy. They're so. Come on, you know these people, man. I mean,
did you just say, "Come on, man"? John, did you just say, "Come on, man"? Did you just go full Joe Biden on me?
Well, I pulled a half of Joe Biden on you.
It was a half Biden. That's a new kind of dive for the Olympics. Hang on, John. Actually, call me back because I love it when people end up complimenting me. But I'm glad you're feeling okay. Keep doing your walk, then go home and take
I feel like crap, but I'm muscling through it.
That's what you got to do. That's what you got to do.
I used to be a federal agent. I worked the streets, buddy, so I know how to tough things out.
Thank you for your service. Thank you for the call. AndrewandTodd.com. I didn't give them their due. I'll get them back in later in the show. AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. If you're in the hunt for a home, call them today and get pre-qualified. 888-888-1172. They're doing jumbos again. 888-888-1172. Stay tuned.
On the Dennis Prager Show.
Unlike the history of the United States, we now are guided by the frightened. The frightened make policy. That's the difference. It's the opposite of the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. All right, Joseph in Baltimore, Maryland. Hello.
Hey, Dennis.
Hi.
You admitted on Tuesday that Israel's done the exact opposite of everything you recommended.
Right.
They've had 6,000 deaths. They have 36 times fewer people. 36 times 6,000 is 220,000. They have almost a third the number of deaths we have. From which I would draw the conclusion that everything you recommended is wrong.
Well, how do you answer this? I looked it up, seeing your call. I looked up the list of countries. 150 countries have fewer deaths per million than Israel. So why do you pick Israel versus the U.S. and not Israel versus the 150 countries, 150 that did better than Israel and didn't do what Israel did?
Well, your recommendations were for the
wait, please answer my question. I thought I answered yours. You compare Israel only to the U.S. I compare Israel to all other countries. I think that that's more scientifically...
Because you've admitted yourself that countries that are homogenous, like Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea, aren't comparable. You don't compare the United States to South Korea. Israel's in
right, but I didn't. I said 150 countries. They're not all homogenous. Okay, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
They gave away all their hydroxychloroquine. They shut down 3 times, and they have one-third the number of deaths we do.
Right, and they would have had a lot fewer deaths had they allowed ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
He's made a very big deal about ghost guns. Homemade guns, as you said, that cannot be traced. I didn't realize there was a rash of ghost guns used in these high-profile mass killings that Biden referenced. Are these massacres in Charleston and in Colorado and all these terrible scenes? Are those all with people who made their guns at home?
No, Mike, you're right. These aren't people who have produced their own firearms in their own homes. We're talking about, in many of these instances, failures of people to either enact on the laws that are available to them or the authorities who failed to take action when they were supposed to. So if we look at the most recent murders in Boulder, Colorado, we see that Colorado already has red flag laws. We see that the family was already concerned about the mental disturbance of the individual who's accused of these crimes, to the point where they actually took the firearm away from him at one point, and he obviously got that back and committed his heinous crimes. But they could have reached out and they could have used the red flag laws available to them there, and they didn't. We look at the Pulse nightclub shootings. In fact, the FBI knew about that and they didn't act. In fact, that was a terror attack and was not just an indiscriminate killing at a nightclub. If we look at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, we know that the FBI was warned twice. We know that the city, state, and county officials had been warned over 40 times that there was concerns with this individual, and they never acted upon those. So what we're talking about is a failure of the system to actually work in the way it's supposed to, because the people were either too afraid or because authorities didn't act when they were warned to. This is not an issue of so-called ghost guns. And what part of the issue is that these are being conflated a lot of times with firearms that show up at a crime scene with the serial numbers obliterated.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
You see, the people that perpetually want more power for themselves, they crisis hop. They hop from one crisis to the other. The environmental crisis, the Chinese coronavirus crisis. A crisis allows you to justify a power grab. There's nothing quite like a crisis that makes you feel more self-important and act like a totalitarian. A crisis generally means that the public will give up their freedoms and liberties. There's something even deeper going on here, though. As the CDC director says racism is a serious public health threat, they are now blending two of their most effective strategies. The fact that Americans will not question the science when it comes from anything from the CDC, despite the fact the CDC has lied to you about basically everything over the last year. The CDC has been wrong about almost everything, contributing to a serious mental health crisis.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. I know not the fastest man in Congress. That's who it is. Mike Gallagher, congressman from Wisconsin, is the fastest man in Congress, though I believe he has to defend his title fairly soon. Is the Nike Challenge coming up pretty soon? I'm sure it's called the Nike Challenge anymore, Congressman.
It's called the ACLI Challenge, and I believe it's set for September. So I have a little bit of time to train, and I have lost a step. So open invitation to Tom Cotton and any other challengers if they want to, step up to the plate and make this a fun competition. You got some months to get ready.
It's a 5K race, and that's why you're good at it. If it was a 10K and it involved a fourth mile, you wouldn't run. I mean, you'd be like the Packers. You'd go off the course at mile 4, right?
How dare you, Hugh? It is true, however, over 3 miles.
It is true. You go fourth mile, you go away.
Over 3 miles, I'm useless. The Marine Corps, it's 3 miles, and anything longer than that, I just, Gallagher's like dwarves in Lord of the Rings. We're good over short distances.
Or like the Packers on for 3 downs out of 4. Hey, Congressman, serious stuff. President announced yesterday we're skedaddling from Afghanistan. That was not the Trump plan. The Trump plan was to leave troops at Bagram, as far as I understand it. Now we're not going to do that. What's going to happen to Bagram? It's going to be like Taliban Central.
Well, Bagram, I think there's a missed opportunity there to talk about the enduring relevance of Bagram, particularly in light of great power competition, right? In other words, if we go to war with China, bombers coming out of Bagram provide us with an opportunity to target Western targets for China, including their space and their counterspace assets. And I really think as we confront honestly the fact that the American people do want us to responsibly reduce our presence over time, we can have a grown-up conversation about where are the areas where we want to leave an enduring presence as we transition to great power competition, and Bagram is one of those. The other thing I'd say is setting the date on 9/11/2021, I think is a really dumb move. I think it hands a PR victory to the Taliban. I think it totally undermines everything that Biden said as a candidate, criticizing Trump for politically motivated timelines and not condition-based withdrawal. I think there's other unanswered questions around whether our allies were consulted during this process. The fact that right now they're briefing NATO allies in Brussels suggests that they weren't, that the decision was made without an honest discussion with their allies. The other thing I think we need clarity on is how the administration intends to avoid that Saigon moment. With the Taliban already failing to live up to its obligations under the peace agreement, Americans should rightly be concerned both about the fate of the Afghans who stood shoulder to shoulder alongside us for the past 20 years, as well as the potential for the Taliban to harbor terrorist groups. Once we're out, we will unlikely be able to get back in if needed.
I've got Admiral McRaven coming on a little bit later today. He's got his new book out, The Honor Code, and I want to talk to him. But I'm not necessarily convinced that all of Afghanistan is going to fall. I think we're going to end up pretty much with a Kurdistan in the north, and hopefully Kabul stays in free Afghan hands. But Helmand and Kandahar look pretty tough. Is that your assessment?
I think so. And I think we need to be very honest about our interests in the country, right? Besides the necessity of avoiding another terrorist safe haven that would threaten the homeland, I don't think we have vital interest in Afghanistan. And so, again, we are going to have to focus our resources and our attention on other theaters, the Indo-Pacific. And I'm not suggesting there are easy answers to the Afghan problem, but we have to avoid some politically motivated decision here. And again, I just think the PR win for the Taliban is evident with the way they're setting the date with this drawdown.
Agreed. Now, you mentioned China and Afghanistan. I did earlier in the show. I think of China and Afghanistan having a giant tractor, a giant cat that just goes forward mile by mile and digs up. And they don't care about human rights, and they don't care about bad publicity, because there is no publicity in China. And they just roll over the people who are in their way. And they are pressing Afghanistan from the east, moving west. Are they going to end up being the empire that succeeds where Alexander the Great, Britain, Russia, and the United States have not succeeded?
Well, certainly they do think about foreign states as barbarians. So they have a long tradition of what's called barbarian handling, if you sort of dig into Chinese history. And their goal through the Belt and Road Initiative is to create not allies or partners, but vassal states that are entirely dependent upon the Chinese Communist Party for their largesse. And if you look at Afghanistan, what is really interesting is the investments that China has made in Pakistan, next to Afghanistan, particularly the Gwadar port in Pakistan. China is really trying to build out a series of strategic bases along the Eurasian rimland in order to not only project power, undermine U.S. power projection, in the same process, but to secure their economic interests throughout the region and create dependent vassal states that are entirely at the whim and mercy of the Chinese Communist Party.
Congressman, I know you know your history. There's a great book called The Honorable Company, which is about the British East India Company. And they are modeling their empire on the British Empire, which was resource poor and ship rich. And they sailed the world, and they had ports everywhere. And they had India for great wealth, and they had the Middle East for transit. And I just see the British Empire re-emerging in the British Empire with Chinese characteristics, President Xi might say.
I like that. I've often thought that there should be an HBO show about the British East India Company, that would be great material for an in-depth show. So there you go, Hugh. That's a free idea that you can produce on the Salem Network.
I'm going forward with that. Let me talk to you about the strangest story of the day. President Biden doesn't want to leave strategic ambiguity behind unless it applies to Johnson & Johnson, which he trashed yesterday. Their team managed to screw up the entire vaccine rollout. Let's put that aside. He is sending a delegation to Taiwan that he's not sending. It's a non-official delegation with Chris Dodd, who's his good friend and actually carries a lot of weight. If you're talking to Chris Dodd, you're kind of talking to the president. And then, for reasons that I do not understand, he's sending Richard Armitage. He of infamous role in the Karl Rove Scooter Libby meltdown that led to the Fitzgerald special counsel, because it was Armitage who leaked the name of Valerie Plame, and no one ever, and Colin Powell and Armitage didn't tell the special counsel or the White House, and we had 3 years of investigation. Why is Richard Armitage going with Chris Dodd to Taiwan? Why not just say we will meet ship with ship and plane with plane in the defense of Taiwan?
I have no idea. It makes no sense. And consider the fact that on Monday, 25 Chinese aircraft, including 18 fighters, 4 nuclear-capable bombers, 2 sub-hunters, and an early warning aircraft entered Taiwan's airspace. And this incursion is part of a disturbing trend of increased CCP belligerence toward Taiwan. So far in response, we've seen the administration say some of the right things, but I think this move makes no sense. I mean, for example, Secretary Blinken on Sunday insisted that the U.S. would ensure Taiwan has the ability to defend itself. Well, it would be a great follow-up if they expanded the commitment to help Taiwan to acquire advanced anti-ship cruise missiles, for example, right? And all of this, I think, starts with ending strategic ambiguity. There was a time when it may have served American interests. Let's not forget that part of the rationale behind the policy was the potential, if far-fetched, scenario in which Taiwan was the aggressor. But those days are long gone. Taiwan poses absolutely no military danger to the PRC, but every day that Beijing isn't quite sure if an American president would sacrifice American lives to keep Taiwan free is a dangerous day. I actually teamed up.
We're in a. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, we're in a very perilous time. I talked about it yesterday with Cotton and with Admiral Stab, and got an interesting conversation thereafter about Whitson Reef. And I wanted to ask you about Whitson Reef because I don't know much about it except that the PRC are sending all their blue hulls, which is that they're sort of coastal ships, to gather in long lines of ships and defy the Philippines authorities. What do you think we ought to do in response to that?
Well, I actually teamed up with some of my colleagues looking at the entire Taiwan scenario, of which that is a part, to introduce the Taiwan Invasion Prevention Act, which would issue a standing authorization for the use of military force to defend Taiwan. It would take a page out of Cold War history and the standing authorization Congress gave President Eisenhower to defend Formosa. But it's not enough just to talk tough. We need to walk the walk and invest in the defense capabilities, which would actually deter the CCP from taking action against Taiwan. There, too, I'm worried about the follow-through on the part of the administration. In real terms, the defense budget that they just proposed represents a cut from last year, and it's between $25 to $40 billion below where every single bipartisan expert tells us we need to be in terms of maintaining that 3 to 5% real growth. So there's a lot of things I think the administration needs to do in partnership with Congress, and I fear they're going in the wrong direction.
Now, it's not anti-climate to invest in hypersonic missiles and anti-submarine technology and in attack submarines. It's not anti-climate. So we've got $4 trillion in spending. Was any of it infrastructure to expand Wisconsin's frigate construction capability? Is any of it infrastructure to go into submarine pens in San Francisco at Mare Island? Did any of it go to defense?
No, the infrastructure plan is incredibly reckless, incredibly reckless. It's going to make our infrastructure problems worse because it repeats the failed mistake of the past where we overinvest and we discount the cost of maintaining infrastructure over the life cycle of a project. And the fact is we are spending more in real terms on infrastructure as a percentage of GDP than we were spending in the 1960s. The fundamental problem is our assets are depreciating and crumbling more quickly than they were back then. And this is going to make that problem far worse. There is so many ridiculous proposals in this bill. And now they're coming to us saying when they have $2 trillion for every grab bag progressive initiative under the sun, that we can't afford to grow the defense budget by 3 to 5% every year. It makes absolutely no sense.
Well, Nancy Pelosi, last question, Congressman. She only has a 2-vote margin right now. Are there 2 Democrats like Lurie on your committee? She got a new challenger. She got to deliver some money for the Navy, or she's going to get beat like a drum in that 2022 election. Are there other Democrats who realize they cannot starve defense and will join you in rejecting an infrastructure bill that does not fund some defense spending?
I hope so. There's certainly a lot of national security-minded Democrats that got elected in 2018 in Trump districts. A lot of them I work with on the Armed Services Committee. Many of them either served in the military, like Representative Luria, or served in the Defense Department, like Representative Slotkin, who I co-chair a task force on supply chain vulnerability with. And so my hope is that a lot of those members can step back from this ledge. However, I will admit I've been surprised that Speaker Pelosi has been able to get near unanimity on some of these very radical proposals, such as H.R. 1, where only one Democrat defected in the vote on the House from an extremely radical centralization and nationalization of our entire election process.
Well, that's a subject for another day, but I am surprised that Democrats who want to get reelected in 2022 have gone that far left. They can come back right on the infrastructure bill. Congressman, look forward to seeing you out there on the byways. Try a 4th mile. Don't be a Packer. Be a Brown. Go the distance. Congressman Mike Gallagher, friends, time for me to remind you about ReliefFactor.com. I'll send him some Relief Factor. Maybe then he can go 4 miles. He's a 3-miler. That's not really a run. That's really not a run. It's not even a trundle. You don't have to be fast. You just have to go for some distance. It's good for your actual overall wellness. I showed you the Telegraph story. I'll show it to you again. Consistent inactivity, and that's pretty much a definition of Congress. Consistent inactivity more than doubles odds of COVID hospitalization. So there's the story. How do you get away from consistent inactivity? By walking and running and trundling, which is a hybrid of running and walking. As you get older, you don't have to run the whole way. You can run and walk and run and walk and run and walk. ReliefFactor.com, no matter what you do, gets you to do more of it because it supports the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that come from exercise. And you've got to be exercising to stay healthy and go the distance. And you want to go the distance. You want your 3-score-and-10. You actually want your 4-score-and-10. That's the new standard. And that's the ReliefFactor.com standard. We want to go long. We want you active. Get your ReliefFactor.com. Starter pack is 3 week supply for $19.99. Give it today. James Hohmann of the Washington Post is next. More from Minnesota. Stay tuned, America.
On the Charlie Kirk Show.
We now have a radical, unproven philosophy, critical race theory, that is running our entire government. The CDC director says racism is a serious public health threat. Quote, a growing body of research shows that centuries of racism in this country has had a profound and negative impact on communities of color. That's not true. It's not true. Read Discrimination and Disparities by Thomas Sowell. Just because there is a disparity does not mean that discrimination is to blame. The fatherless epidemic in the black community is a serious public health threat. You want to know what's keeping black people down? It's not racism. It's government programs, failing public schools, Democrat policies, and the lack of fathers in the home.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Why is it that we have to wait? Is this so often the case for a British tabloid newspaper to report the story of Hunter Biden for anybody to take notice?
Because our media just aren't interested. Our media want to protect the Bidens. They want to protect liberals, most of the media. And they just aren't, they're not honest brokers, right? We knew the contents of this laptop in September and October.
Yeah.
This should have been out and out everywhere. But what do we have instead? Instead, we had the New York Post being blocked from Twitter. Instead, we had CNN and others suggesting that Hunter Biden's own laptop that he signed over was somehow Russian disinformation. Absolute nonsense.
Well, it's strange, isn't it? It's strange to say, it's Russian disinformation. Then for Hunter Biden in a puff piece interview this week say, it could have, I don't know. I'm not sure if it was mine. It could be Russian disinformation. Boris, if your lawyers are
to our two-day champion on the end. Scott, did you come up with the correct response? Who wanted to kick that field goal? That is a great question. Should be correct, but unfortunately for this game today, that's incorrect.
Handing the computers back, doesn't that mean they are Hunter Biden's? Am I crazy there?
You're not crazy, my friend. You're not crazy. You're more rational than Hunter Biden, but you're definitely, you're definitely not crazy. This whole thing is such a joke. Hunter Biden is laughing in the face of Americans with these interviews. Jimmy Kimmel, where he dares to attack Don Jr., while T. Hunter is literally the face of nepotism in America. I mean, this is somebody who is a good.
Welcome back, America. Our big Jim and Jim Geraghty, the indispensable man from National Review. Good morning, Jim. How are you?
How are you this morning?
I'm very happy because I've been reading the New York Post this morning, which quotes Deseret News writer Doug Robinson Peel open letter to the New York Jets. Please, Jets, give Zach Wilson a break. Look, the Jets are to quarterbacks what Larry King was to marriage, Robinson wrote. Look at their record. He's begging them not to take Zach Wilson. What do you think, Geraghty? There's truth in that, right? You can't argue with him.
Okay. I'm not taking this grief from a Cleveland Browns fan. All right?
Hey, we are Super Bowl contenders. We don't even.
Have you guys had anybody since Kosar? Anyway,
we have got a guy named Baker Mayfield who got a playoff win. You know what a playoff win is? I don't know if that's in your background.
Very good.
Yeah.
Hey, if that's what you had. You haven't had one of those since before. You had one of those after the winless season, right?
We haven't had a playoff win since 1994. That was our first playoff win, but we are back and going to the Super Bowl this year. But you're back rebuilding. I mean, a quarterback project that doesn't even last 3 years is kind of sad, Geraghty.
Oh, here's the thing. I'm perfectly fine with the Jets trading away Sam Darnold. I wouldn't be surprised if he flourished in Carolina. Look, I mean, Hugh, you're a football fan. Do you really think the problem is Sam Darnold, or do you really think the problem is Adam Gase and Joel Loggins calling the plays?
There are many. I don't understand. We had a dysfunctional franchise in Cleveland. We always knew what the problem was. No quarterback. So we tried 40 of them, right? So you just keep trying till you find one. But normally you give them longer than 2 years.
It's 3, Hugh.
Okay, it just seems like
when Adam
4.
Gase is calling screens on 3rd and long, and there's terrible protection, and there's no running game, and they let Robbie Anderson walk to the Panthers. No quarterback's going to thrive in that situation. So I'm very curious to see how Darnold does in a new uniform. It's pretty obvious the Jets are going to draft Zach Wilson, and as long as they have a decent protection around him, I think he's great things await him. But I wouldn't be surprised if they went with Justin Fields. Is this all just a sales pitch for Justin Fields in the end?
Yes, it is. It's exactly what it is. I want Justin Fields in the Big Apple. He's much better for the Big Apple than Zach Wilson. Another pretty boy. It doesn't work. You got to have a guy with legs.
I would not mind selecting Fields, but and perhaps it's entirely possible this is a Joe Douglas smokescreen. He really does want Justin Fields, and all of this is meant to throw everybody off. But when you have the second overall pick, you don't really need to do that.
That's what I was going to say. You don't need to head fake anyone when Urban's already got the guys measured and coming, and they know that Lawrence is going. Okay, let's turn to politics. You're pretty good at messaging. I'm pretty good at messaging. I was not consulted by the White House on the messaging yesterday that trashed months and months of vaccine work. The dumbest move by the government in a year of dumb moves involving COVID, a year and a half of dumb moves involving COVID. What did you make of the FDA, CDC pause? Oh, God, I can't even say it. What did you think?
Absolutely maddening, in part because we saw a very similar process going on with the European equivalent of the CDC and the AstraZeneca vaccine. And all over Europe, they stopped using the AstraZeneca vaccine for about a week or so. As your listeners probably know, Europe is in much worse shape than we are. They are much slower in their rollout of their vaccine to their citizens than the United States is. And it was a similar issue of blood clots. And, I put some of this in the Morning Jolt yesterday. Look, you can have blood clots for a whole bunch of different reasons. A whole bunch of people worry about this if they're sitting on long plane rides for long periods of time, right? I mean, circulation issues. But one of the more intriguing things is the possibility of this relating to birth control pills and/or pregnancy. You noticed it in that New York Times article describing it. All of the people who had been reported this were women between the ages of, I think it was 18 to 48 or something like that. Does this mean it was birth control pills? Look, we just don't know right now. But apparently, blood clots are not that uncommon amongst the general population. So could it be that these blood clots are a result of taking the Johnson & Johnson vaccine? Yeah, it is a possibility. I don't mind the FDA taking a second look at this. I do have a bit of a problem with the fact, look, we've still got, anywhere from 750 to 1,000 people dying of COVID-19 a day. And you're going to say, okay, we're going to halt this. And that's not even the real problem. People get a week from now. We've vaccinated most of the most vulnerable folks. We're probably going to get through this part okay. What really worries me, I don't know about you, Hugh, I was hearing from people who are saying, aha, see, the vaccine isn't safe.
100%.
That's why I'm not getting, 100%. I was skeptics all day long.
The anti-vaxxers rose up as if one and said,
now
see, we told you. And now,
they trust the FDA.
And Johnson & Johnson is going to be the one that gets to the third world because its refrigeration requirements are lower. So they have screwed up and we got to worry about the third world because of variants. I'm very pro-science on this. The government doesn't know what it's doing.
Well, I mean, I think this has this extraordinarily risk-averse, cautious-minded thing. And I guess in some way, maybe they think that they are helping fight vaccine skepticism by doing this pause. If they do what the European agency did with the AstraZeneca vaccine, is they'll look at the data for, a week and say, there's no reason to think this vaccine is dangerous, but we'll put a warning label on this. And the idea of we want doctors to be on the lookout, basically, for the potential of blood clots after somebody gets this vaccine. Well, that's not going to do any good.
No, just consider the public choice theory, which is that the FDA is flexing its muscles to remind everyone it has muscles. That's what the public choice theory is. Geraghty the Indispensable, get his morning jolt at National Review. Follow him on Twitter at Jim Geraghty and pray for the Jets. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Headline, and I'm quoting, 2 CBS TV executives are fired after one called a black TV anchor just a jive guy, and the other called a female employee an effing idiot. Peter Dunn, president of CBS television stations, and David Friend, senior VP for news at the stations, were ousted on Wednesday. I'm laughing because polls show that 83% of Democrats believe that Donald Trump is a racist. 83%. This guy is calling a black TV anchor just a jive guy while reporting how racist Donald Trump is. Can't make this up.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Well, if I don't quote the Journal of the American Medical Association to substantiate a point I make, then people like you call up and say you have no scientific basis. So if I quote them, oh, Dennis, you're not honest because you don't always trust them. But if I don't quote them, Dennis, you have no.
They said ivermectin was worthless.
Yes, and it will be to their everlasting death-creating discredit that they did so. That is what I believe.
They're a fraud. They're a fraud.
In this regard, they have been fraudulent.
When they agree with you, then they're
no. There are areas I have no. Okay, on this, on ivermectin. Okay, that's right. I believe it's fraudulent. That is exactly correct, my friend. That is right. Just as I did on inanimate objects, spreading the disease. I've turned out right, and I live by it. I'm on ivermectin. Okay, an unbelievably safe thing. That these people prefer to put people on ventilators than give them ivermectin early has created in me a contempt for the Journal of the American Medical Association and the New England Journal of Medicine and the medical profession that I never had before. Better to go on a ventilator than take ivermectin early. These people are killing Americans. There are epidemiologists I have had on this show from Yale and elsewhere who believe that hundreds of thousands of Americans are dead because of the medical profession. I agree with that. That's worse than fraud. That's homicide. Get it?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
I will ask for your reaction to the president's promise that nothing he recommended impinges on the Second Amendment.
Well, it is a very, I guess, unique interpretation of what the Second Amendment is then. If we're looking at the infringement upon the Second Amendment and the government trying to pass any kind of restrictions on that, I certainly think there's an argument to be said that if he's passing the idea that you can no longer build a firearm in your home, which has always been legal in America, even before the founding of our nation, you could build a firearm in your home. If he's now saying you can't do that, well, I would argue that we're looking at an infringement upon Second Amendment rights. If he's talking about reclassifying an entire class of pistols under the National Firearms Act, which would make it so you couldn't possess these firearms unless you submit your photo, you submit your fingerprints, you pay a $200 tax stamp, and undergo extensive background checks through the ATF, and then be put on a government watch list simply for exercising your Second Amendment rights. I think that that's called an infringement upon your rights, and I think that's something that the American public needs to reach out to their members of Congress and remind them that they are the check on the executive branch. The legislative branch then is one of the checks to keep the executive branch within their role and make sure that they're not overreaching.
Which is precisely why Biden wants to use executive orders. He wants to do an end around, and he wants to try to avoid the legislative process, because the legislative process is ultimately the way the American people can push back against restrictions, constitutional restrictions like this.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Calling new Biden legislation an infrastructure plan is like calling a shark a dolphin. They both may have dorsal fins, but you mistake one for the other at your peril. Don't be fooled. Only 5% of the bill's spending would actually go for roads and bridges, what normal people think of as infrastructure. Add in items like Amtrak and broadband, and you're still only at 30% of the eye-popping total of $2.3 trillion. And you're supposed to pay for all of this with the biggest tax increase since 1968. Here's what's worse. The bill is actually about leftist social engineering. It would end right to work, something the left hates because it guarantees no one can be forced to join a union or pay union dues in order to hold a job. Ending it offers a rich new source of campaign contributions for Democrats. Calling a shark a dolphin doesn't make it one. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Woodrow Wilson was more concerned with his legacy than what was right for America. He believed the founding fathers were misled. He was the first president in American history to actually philosophically and politically challenge the beliefs of the founding fathers. Woodrow Wilson and Joe Biden are very similar. They care about a radical restructuring and redefinition of America, and I'm going to say something controversial that I have not said publicly. You ready for this? Joe Biden is governing much more radically than Barack Obama. Let me say that again. Joe Biden is governing much more radically. Is that the right way to say it? Much more radically? I guess that's correct. Just doesn't sound right. He's governing more radically than Barack Obama. One of the main reasons is because the people behind him are growing impatient. And they're starting to smell and taste victory. Cut 86, MSNBC analyst, says it himself. Play Cut 86.
Just trying to push forward. So that's a big thing, a paradigm kind of shift. Maybe, I know we've been talking about this for several weeks here, the Roosevelt era to the Reagan era. Are we on the verge of a new activist, progressive era led in an unlikely way by Joe Biden? I think that's not impossible.
Not impossible. MSNBC starting to get excited. Joe Biden is doing more for the anti-American cause in America than any person that has been in office recently.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Well, it's strange, isn't it? It's strange to say, it's Russian disinformation. Then for Hunter Biden in a puff piece interview this week say, it could have, I don't know. I'm not sure if it was mine. It could be Russian disinformation. Boris, if your lawyers are demanding the computers back, doesn't that mean they are Hunter Biden's? Am I crazy there?
You're not crazy, my friend. You're not crazy. You're more rational than Hunter Biden. But you're definitely, you're definitely not crazy. This whole thing is such a joke. Hunter Biden is laughing in the face of Americans with these interviews. Jimmy Kimmel, where he dares to attack Don Jr., while T. Hunter is literally the face of nepotism in America. I mean, this is somebody who is a good-for-nothing failure, who's committed crime after crime. All you have to do is look at the contents of the laptop. And yet he gets to go on CBS this morning. And by the way, talk about collusion, talk about cahoots. Viacom CBS owns Simon & Schuster, which put out the book. And then he goes on CBS to promote it. That's
Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway, joined by New York Times reporter Michael Shear, one of their White House correspondents. Hello, Michael. How are you?
Good. Good morning, Hugh.
I am back inside the Beltway and happy to be here, but I am surprised and confused by a story out of the White House I was hoping you could help me with. President Biden is sending, not sending, an official, not official delegation to Taiwan, led by Chris Dodd, his real best friend, and of all people, Richard Armitage, which I just do not understand. What's the theory here, Michael?
I don't know. It's not a story I've been directly reporting on, but I do think, the conversation that we had the last time I was on, in which you posed the question, is the United States taking seriously the military threat to Taiwan by China that seems to be ramping up? The Chinese have been very aggressive of late. And I think the answer to that question is yes, they are taking it seriously. The United States government does understand that the threat towards Taiwan, even a military threat, is probably more serious now than it's been in a long time. And I think, I think the delegation that they're sending, as well as the attention that is being paid inside the West Wing to that question, is evidence that that the United States is concerned, and that they're beginning to think through if not specific military or diplomatic responses, and at least trying to get their ducks in a row to figure out how would they react to various provocations by the Chinese.
I think they're getting to Neville Chamberlain land, and so appeasement-itis is heavy there. And if it wasn't, they would be sending specific messages about Whitson Reef. And has that come up in the briefing room when you've been there? Has anyone asked Jen Psaki about Whitson Reef, where the Chinese are collecting all of their little boats and trying to abrogate Philippine sovereignty?
That specific thing has not come up to my knowledge. I don't watch every single briefing the entire way through, so it's possible that somebody did ask. But I do know the general question of what will the United States do in the event that the Chinese move on Taiwan in a more aggressive way has come up. They've been very circumspect. At least Psaki has been very circumspect in the briefing about what specific options are on the table. But I think the question of that you pose, right, which is sort of appeasement on the one hand versus some serious military defense of Taiwan, the United States coming to an actual armed conflict with China. I mean, I think that's the big question on the table, is where on that spectrum will the United States and the Biden administration be? I don't think we know the answer to that yet.
Yeah, the abrogation of strategic ambiguity is urgent, the need to do that. I thought Mike Pompeo did it very well in the last administration, though President Trump was himself a practitioner of the strategic ambiguity. And as Josh Rogan's book makes clear, he was doubtful about the ability to defend Taiwan, but actually it's pretty easily accomplished if there's a price to be paid. I just wish that they would announce they're willing to pay it. Let me ask you about messaging, Michael. Yesterday was a fiasco on Johnson & Johnson. And I helped the Andy Slavitt team try and talk up vaccines. I talk up vaccines every day. People need to go and get them. 7 cases out of 8 million vaccines, 1 fatality, limited to women 18 to 43, and they botched the entire messaging. Are they aware of how badly botched it is?
I don't know. It's hard to get inside their heads to know if they understand the disconnect. But what I think, one of my colleagues wrote a story about this in today's paper, and what I think is very true and gets at the point that you're making, is the real disconnect between the scientists who view this as, well, of course, you just want to pause for a couple of days to, do a little bit of research to satisfy some, academic kind of interest in knowing whether the blood clotting is actually linked to the vaccine, the scientists' reaction disconnected completely from the way the public understands and took that in part, as you say, because of the way the sort of stumbling way that the announcement was made and came out. It sort of came out of nowhere. People weren't prepared for it. And I do think that the public sees that very differently, and that it comes across the way that it's come across in Europe, frankly. There's polling now that suggests that more than half of the public in Europe doesn't trust the AstraZeneca vaccine, which had a similar issue with a few instances of blood clotting. And I fear that that's what's happening in the United States, is that this is going to be used by people to very much undermine the confidence in all of these vaccines.
That is the AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson, for the benefit of the audience, are the two that can travel easiest. They can go to Brazil, they can go to Africa, they can go anywhere in the world because the refrigeration requirements are much less required. I don't think there is any with Johnson & Johnson. So they will stop the variant spread, which will stop in turn any variant coming to the United States or to the West that is evasive of Pfizer and Moderna. It has to get out there. And what frustrates me about the reporting, Michael, is they say the CDC and the FDA decided. Well, alphabet agencies don't decide. People do. And somebody made that decision. And I haven't seen any reporting on whether or not they cleared it with Dr. Fauci, whether they cleared it with the White House. But it was public choice theory at its best. The FDA reminding all the drug companies that they exist and they have power to the great destructive impact that you just discussed, which is to sow seeds of doubt across the third world and in the United States about vaccines generally and Johnson & Johnson specifically. And then President Biden botched the replay. They went to the replay officials in the Oval, and that was a mess. And then Tony Fauci botched the second call. It was like watching a Browns game where the referees hate the Browns. It was terrible. Are they going to try and do pickup sticks today?
Yeah, we'll see what happens today. I mean, look, one of the things that is true about politics at this level is that oftentimes the people in power look to the past for guidance, right? And one of the things that the Biden administration, one of the lessons the Biden administration took from the Trump administration was that there was too much political interference by the Trump administration in the scientific judgments of places, of the top people at places like the CDC and the FDA. So now the Biden administration has swung very much in the complete opposite direction, where they have, they've said that they are hands off, that they want to let the scientists, the top officials at the sort of medical and public health agencies make those decisions. You got to sort of wonder whether that has swung a little bit too far, that there does need to sometimes be some tempering of medical and public health decision making, where somebody in the White House says, let's think about this a minute. Is this, how do we present this to the American public so that they understand the context?
Yeah, bureaucrats do not know best how to message and import. They undercut the entire. I dealing with callers this morning have been waiting to rise up as one to say, "See, we told you." They underestimate entirely the difficulty of getting a messaging going. And if you defer to a bureaucrat, they will do well. President Trump, do you know he was on Seb Gorka's show yesterday? Did you hear that, Michael?
I didn't. No, I don't listen to Seb's show. So.
Let me play for you. Cut 21. Donald Trump on Seb's show yesterday.
At the same time, I think I'm getting the word out really well. We do releases. We release when there's something like today. We did a release on Johnson & Johnson. Why did the FDA? I understand the FDA very well. I'm the one that pushed them. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a vaccine for 3 to 5 years if you had one at all. And so I understand. Why did they have to do that to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine? Because they put a stigma on it by doing what they did. And
all right, there's more, but the point is, he did break all the rules at the FDA. You're right. He interfered. Thank God, because every expert said we wouldn't have a vaccine for years, and we had one in December of last year because of Operation Warp Speed. 3, in fact. You can't let the FDA revert to norm, Michael, and that's what I think happened yesterday.
And that's, a one-shot
vaccine. I guess what I would say is, I think, the
And it had
folks
something very interesting.
that
I
I've
guess,
talked to suggest that there's got to be
when they had
some
COVID,
kind of middle ground there, right? The reporting that we did last year was that there was an awful lot of unwarranted political interference by the Trump administration. I'm not sure that I've talked to anybody who really thinks that the FDA and the CDC would have held up a vaccine for 3 to 5 years. The vaccine development was largely driven by the companies themselves, with some, financial assistance from the United States, to be sure. The question is not, do you revert to a place where, the White House is overriding the best judgments of the FDA and the CDC? The question is, do you need from a White House an aggressive understanding of the kind of messaging and the kind of impact that the CDC's decisions have, so that, as you say, the American public understands the context of it. And I agree with you. Scientists are not the best at public messaging. If they were the best at public messaging, they wouldn't be scientists.
They wouldn't be scientists. And
they would be PR people.
I am one of the people that 100% stand behind what Trump did to the FDA. But thank you, Michael Shear. I'll be right back. Michael Shear, the New York Times. Follow him at Shear M on Twitter. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
AOC in mid-season form. Remember when she said there's no surge at the border because children are not insurgents?
They want to say, what about the surge? Well, first of all, just gut check, stop. Anyone who's using the term surge around you,
gut check, stop.
Consciously is trying to invoke a militaristic frame.
A militaristic frame is trying to invoke a militaristic frame. She can sling it, can't she?
And that's a problem because this is not a surge.
It is not a surge. It is more of a...
These are children.
Oh, so therefore it's not a surge.
And they are not insurgents.
Ah, okay. And remember when she had difficulty trying to figure out what a garbage disposal was?
I am told this is a garbage disposal.
I am told. I don't know who told me. I can't reveal the identity, but a whistleblower told me that this is a garbage disposal.
I've never seen a garbage disposal.
I've never smelled a garbage disposal.
I never had one in any place I've ever lived.
I've never fondled one.
I don't know what to use it for.
I don't know whether or not it's alive. It appears to be motionless, but it might be playing possum. It is hard to say.
Or what its purpose is. Like food scraps?
Like food scraps?
I don't know.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
Joseph in Baltimore, Maryland. Hello.
You admitted on Tuesday that Israel's done the exact opposite of everything you recommended.
Right.
They've had 6,000 deaths. They have 36 times fewer people. 36 times 6,000 is 220,000. They have almost a third the number of deaths we have. From which I would draw the conclusion that everything you recommended is wrong.
Well, how do you answer this? I looked it up, seeing your call. I looked up the list of countries. 150 countries have fewer deaths per million than Israel. So why do you pick Israel versus the U.S. and not Israel versus the 150 countries, 150 that did better than Israel and didn't do what Israel did?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
I will ask for your reaction to the president's promise that nothing he recommended impinges on the Second Amendment.
if he's passing the idea that you can no longer build a firearm in your home, which has always been legal in America, even before the founding of our nation, you could build a firearm in your home. If he's now saying you can't do that, well, I would argue that we're looking at an infringement upon Second Amendment rights. If he's talking about reclassifying an entire class of pistols under the National Firearms Act, which would make it so you couldn't possess these firearms unless you submit your photo, you submit your fingerprints, you pay a $200 tax stamp, and undergo extensive background checks through the ATF, and then be put on a government watch list simply for exercising your Second Amendment rights. I think that that's called an infringement.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
We now have a radical, unproven philosophy, critical race theory, that is running our entire government. The CDC director says racism is a serious public health threat. Quote, a growing body of research shows that centuries of racism in this country has had a profound and negative impact on communities of color. That's not true. It's not true. Read Discrimination and Disparities by Thomas Sowell. Just because there is a disparity does not mean that discrimination is to blame. The fatherless epidemic in the black community is a serious public health threat. You want to know what's keeping black people down? It's not racism.
Welcome back, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. I only want to be with you at my podcast, The Interview, or the Hugh Hewitt Podcast, all available at iTunes, Apple, and every other place, including the SalemPodcastNetwork.com. The Interview is my long-form interviews with people, and mostly they're new, and occasionally I throw in a golden oldie like Christopher Hitchens and Mark Roberts debating the existence of God for 2 hours, which I posted on Monday. Admiral McRaven will be my guest today in the last segment. We'll continue talking and post that as a podcast as well. So you get that at The Interview, but if you just want the best of the day's show, you get the Hugh Hewitt Podcast over at all, wherever podcasts are. And I just appreciate you subscribing and commenting and saying, what a great podcast this is terrific. And earlier I confused some of you by talking about various realtors. And that's because Vivian Armstrong is a Nashville realtor, and I mentioned Sparta. I'm sure she takes care of people in Sparta as well. And so my new affiliate in Sparta, it's near the I-40. It's near Nashville. I'm sure some of you need realtors too. And Vivian Armstrong is the realtor in Nashville that works with AndrewandTodd.com, like Denise and Catherine Culloden. I guess it's Collodon, in Phoenix, Arizona, work with AndrewandTodd.com. And Melanie Griffin in Texas works with AndrewandTodd.com. And Ryan Adams in Houston works with AndrewandTodd.com. And J.C. Olson in L.A. They're all over the place. All right? So they're all over the place. And if you need a realtor in this crazy market, start with AndrewandTodd.com, because they're the ones who will get you pre-qualified. I told this story in hour one. I want to retell it about Beltway right now. I came back to a Beltway where it's impossible to buy a house. I had a friend send me a note yesterday. They made a 5-figure offer over listing price, and did not get the house. Someone else did the same thing for the same amount with no contingencies. And okay, that's the world we live in. One of the contingencies you have to get rid of is financing. How do you get rid of it? You pre-qualify with Sierra Pacific, AndrewandTodd.com. You call them at 888-888-1172. And you say to me, but Hugh, I need a jumbo. And everybody says I can't get a jumbo, which means more money than normal. You know, I need to put down $700,000 and I've saved up $300,000. I'm buying $1 million house. I guess jumbos started around $685. I don't know. I haven't bought a house in a long time, and I'm not buying any more houses. And the jumbos went away for a while. They just did. They vanished. Whew, gone. And the reason they went away is because the market was crazy after the virus hit. And non-conforming loans were not popular. Refinancing of rental properties became almost impossible. Cash out refinances became very hard. That's all gone now. The banks are back, but Sierra Pacific is way back. Sierra Pacific is lending to everything for everyone who has decent credit. And by the way, andrewandtodd.com, Andrew Del Rey, Todd Abakian, been my friend for a year, great sponsors of this show. They will help you get your credit dings off, get your credit score up, and get the jumbo non-conforming loan that you need. Pricing is great. The Fannie and Freddie high balance loans are priced really nice. The investment property, rental property rates are back. They're wonderful. They're terrific. And the realtors are there. I'm just telling you, this market is the craziest I have ever seen. Why? Because interest rates are low and demand is high. Normally, interest rates rise when demand is like this, when there aren't enough houses, when there's a shortage of supply. But because we are flooding the zone with money, and the Fed has promised everyone that interest rates are not going to go up. I'm about to do the market check for you. Because they promised everyone interest rates are not going up. The interest rate has stayed low. It's incredibly counterintuitive, but the 10-year dropped yesterday to 1.623%. That means your 30-year fixed are great. A little bit higher for the jumbos, a little bit higher for the refinancing of a rental property, a little bit higher for everything that isn't a conforming loan. But they're there. Go get them with andrewandtodd.com. Yesterday, the Dow went up 68 points. The NASDAQ went up 146, and the S&P went up 13. A note from an analyst of Amazon said it's a $5,700 stock that's trading at $3,400. You think there's a boom coming? Yes. The real estate thing's not going to get easier. It's going to get harder. Go to andrewandtodd.com today or call them at 888-888-1172. I'll be right back, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Calling new Biden legislation an infrastructure plan is like calling a shark a dolphin. They both may have dorsal fins, but you mistake one for the other at your peril. Don't be fooled. Only 5% of the bill's spending would actually go for roads and bridges, what normal people think of as infrastructure. Add in items like Amtrak and broadband, and you're still only at 30% of the eye-popping total of $2.3 trillion. And you're supposed to pay for all of this with the biggest tax increase since 1968. Here's what's worse. The bill is actually about leftist social engineering. It would end right to work, something the left hates because it guarantees no one can be forced to join a union or pay union dues in order to hold a job. Ending it offers a rich new source of campaign contributions for Democrats. Calling a shark a dolphin doesn't make it one. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Woodrow Wilson was more concerned with his legacy than what was right for America. He believed the founding fathers were misled. He was the first president in American history to actually philosophically and politically challenge the beliefs of the founding fathers. Woodrow Wilson and Joe Biden are very similar. They care about a radical restructuring and redefinition of America, and I'm going to say something controversial that I have not said publicly. You ready for this? Joe Biden is governing much more radically than Barack Obama. Let me say that again. Joe Biden is governing much more radically. Is that the right way to say it? Much more radically? I guess that's correct. Just doesn't sound right. He's governing more radically than Barack Obama. One of the main reasons is because the people behind him are growing impatient. And they're starting to smell and taste victory. Cut 86, MSNBC analyst, says it himself. Play Cut 86.
Just trying to push forward. So that's a big thing, a paradigm kind of shift. Maybe, I know we've been talking about this for several weeks here, the Roosevelt era to the Reagan era. Are we on the verge of a new activist, progressive era led in an unlikely way by Joe Biden? I think that's not impossible.
Not impossible. MSNBC starting to get excited. Joe Biden is doing more for the anti-American cause in America than any person that has been in office recently.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube now today on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Well, it's strange, isn't it? It's strange to say, it's Russian disinformation. Then for Hunter Biden in a puff piece interview this week say, it could have, I don't know. I'm not sure if it was mine. It could be Russian disinformation. Boris, if your lawyers are demanding the computers back, doesn't that mean they are Hunter Biden's? Am I crazy there?
You're not crazy, my friend. You're not crazy. You're more rational than Hunter Biden. You're definitely, you're definitely not crazy. This whole thing is such a joke. Hunter Biden is laughing in the face of Americans with these interviews. Jimmy Kimmel, where he dares to attack Don Jr., while T. Hunter is literally the face of nepotism in America. I mean, this is somebody who's a good-for-nothing failure, who's committed crime after crime. All you have to do is look at the contents of the laptop. And yet he gets to go on CBS this morning. And by the way, talk about collusion, talk about cahoots. Viacom CBS owns Simon & Schuster, which put out the book. And then he goes on CBS to promote it. That's globalism for you in today's economy. Hunter Biden is an affront to the American people. The fact that the truth about him didn't come out during the campaign is a huge failure of mainstream media, but not one that I think they're going to fix anytime soon because they're so in bed with the left.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
AOC in mid-season form. Remember when she said there's no surge at the border because children are not insurgents?
They want to say, what about the surge? Well, first of all, just gut check, stop. Anyone who's using the term surge around you,
gut check, stop.
Consciously is trying to invoke a militaristic frame.
A militaristic frame. Is trying to invoke a militaristic frame. She can sling it, can't she?
And that's a problem because this is not a surge.
It is not a surge. It is more of a...
These are children.
Oh, so therefore it's not a surge.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Let me remind you to head over to HughHewitt.com. You can subscribe to the universe if you ever want, every minute of every Hugh Hewitt show ever done. And you can support election integrity. There's a banner at the very top. It's not a sponsor. It's a Salem banner. We put it up there. Stand with Georgia. Support election integrity. Know the truth about the Georgia election law. I've read it. Have you read it? It's a voting reform and expansion and security bill. And I don't care what Coca-Cola Blue Coke does. Coke is now a Democrat drink. I don't care what Delta Airlines does. It's now a Democrat airline, Blue Airline. I don't care what Major League Baseball Rob Manfred does. Now Major League Baseball is a blue sport. I'm still following the Indians, still cheering for the Tribe. Very happy with Shane Bieber last night. Amazing performance. Opened the show talking about it. So I'm going to follow him and cheer and root for him. I'm just not going to buy any tickets this year or buy any Indians merch. Not going to do it. Wouldn't be prudent. Didn't know it was a blue sport until Rob Manfred put his foot in his mouth and hadn't read the law and has been hiding since then and won't engage. And all these corporate executives who are getting together to suppress speech. Big story in the New York Times today about the Swiss tycoon who is going to buy the Trib company. And there are details in there about the left-wing group that has been organized to bend media narratives. I felt it for years. I'd never seen it named, the Hub Project. I've known it's out there. I've known it's been at work. I knew it was well organized. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I've never spent any time talking to you about George Soros or anything else. But this story is really an eye-opener, and I would recommend you go and read it. because it's about a threat. That this whole attack on the Georgia election law is simply not true. It's simply propaganda, and I want you to stand with Georgia. Go over and sign the petition at hughhewitt.com. Now, I want to go back and try and undo the damage. You know what sunk costs are? I've talked a lot about over the years sunk costs. Maybe this audience knows. In economics and in business decision making, a sunk cost is a cost that has been incurred and cannot be recovered. It's gone. You got to write it off. It's done. You spent the money. Maybe it was a mistake. You can't allow past sunk costs to influence future spending. And one of the great things that innovators do is they cut loose their sunk costs in a hurry. They admit mistakes and they get away from them. They don't repeat them. They're not wedded to them. As they say in the NFL draft process, short memory, great future. Meaning that when you get burned on a route, you got a cornerback with a short memory, it does not bother them for the rest of the game. They forget about it. When you got a baseball game and you got a pitcher that serves up a gopher ball, wouldn't be named Shane Bieber, through 9 shutout innings yesterday, got the win, but he got the win because he was relieved and got the run at the top of the 10th. James Conasec got the save. But if you give up a gopher ball, you got to forget about it. You got to have a short memory. That's all sunk costs. So here's the deal, Team Biden. And I know you're listening. I know exactly who's listening. You screwed up yesterday, big time. So did you, Dr. Fauci, and you know I'm a fan. You screwed up yesterday. 1-800-520-1234, by the way, America, you can disagree with me. You should never have, quote, paused the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. You could have announced there's this extremely rare blood clot that has occurred in 1 in a million. Really, it's 1 in a million cases. 1 in a million. Can you believe how low the chances are you're going to get a blood clot? And by the way, you have to be a woman. It's only women 18 to 43, and we're not even sure that it's the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. But just to be it's the safest vaccine in the world. But we want doctors to know to look out for blood clots among women 18 to 45, and we'll let you know when it's proven not to be Johnson & Johnson. But Johnson & Johnson is completely safe. That's what you should have done. Instead, you let some bureaucrat who has no understanding of public messaging and vaccine rollout and the worldwide problem, no comprehension of the damage they did, making an announcement from FDA based upon their little narrow gauge Mr. Peabody glasses staring at their data, that they would normally in a trial for an orphan disease that doesn't move at anything except a snail's pace make, and they demand more data, and because that's what the FDA does. You allowed Mr. Peepers to throw the entire worldwide vaccination message into disarray. Now, that's a sunk cost. That was yesterday. What you do today, you send Tony out there and you say, you know what? We screwed up yesterday. Sorry. But there is no pause. That was a complete overreaction by some well-meaning people. You know, he did that once on my show. I asked him about the screw-up in testing. If you've forgotten this, a year ago, the CDC screwed up the test. And that's not a Trump fault. Trump never blamed him. Trump never beat up on him, but they totally screwed up the test. And it was because of the old rules that the CDC and the FDA worked under test approval. And Dr. Fauci came on the show the first time I asked him. He said, that was just a mistake. Nobody intended it. Those things happen. Yeah, those things happen and cost us 5 or 6 weeks in a deadly game. But he was right. No sense worrying. Nobody has done anything intentional that was wrong. I wish people would get that through their head. Nobody wants anybody to die. Everybody wants everybody to live. We're not the Chinese Communist Party. It's not a Republican or a Democratic disease. It's a killer disease for some people, and it won't bother other people. And we got to get people the vaccination. We got to get people vaccinated. And people have got to be willing to go in. And there is no risk. There is no risk that is appreciable. There is no risk of any of these vaccines greater than you're driving your car to the grocery store today. Unless you decide to live in your house. By the way, it's risky to stay in your house and not move. It's risky to walk up the stairs. If you're Dwayne, it's risky to come to work. He could electrocute himself. You know, he doesn't know how to do this stuff that I know how to do with the equipment. So it's risky. There's risk in everything. You can fall down the stairs today and break your neck. You ever been on a ladder? Our friend Carl is the best painter I know, he fell off of a ladder after doing something for 35 years. I myself have had an occasional accident because of coordination issues. Nothing is risk-free. About the closest risk-free thing in the world are these vaccines. And the risk-reward ratio is enormous. And that goes for Johnson & Johnson. It's completely safe. There's nobody in their right mind. I don't even know how anyone came up with the idea we needed to pause this. The dumbest thing I've seen in years and decades of government. After all the money that's been invested, after all the time, after all the carnage, after all the bad decisions, after all that, we finally have vaccines rolling out and people standing in line, good messaging, everybody's on the same page except for a tiny group of nutter anti-vaxxers. And along comes the FDA and the CDC and they blow it up. And by the way, it's not the FDA and the CDC, it's somebody made that call. Somebody decided that. Some scientist made this. Someone said, we've got to pause this. This number is terrible. 1 in 8 million people died, and it might have been related to Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Stop everything. Not realizing what happens. And then they threw the ball to Joe Biden, who fumbled. And then they threw the ball to Tony Fauci. I love Dr. Fauci. Listen to this. Listen to this. Cut number 7.
So when individuals, particularly younger women, who might come into a physician with a particular thrombotic phenomenon, which is things that happen for other reasons all the time, that we want to alert physicians to take a history of a recent vaccination. That would be important.
Stop.
So the pause not only
allows... sense to anyone except me. A thrombotic phenomenon. To alert physicians to take a history of recent vaccination, as opposed to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is safe. It's really great. Go get any vaccine you can. If you're a woman between 18 and 43, be aware that there's this very rare thing, blood clot, that has happened to 7 out of 8.5 million people. And so tell your doctor that you got the Johnson & Johnson. And if they find out it's related to pregnancy, tell us that too. Don't stop the vaccine. Don't deny its efficacy. And by the way, now that you've screwed up, come out today and admit it. Come out today and say, we slept on it, we thought about it, we made a mistake. We made a mistake. Not the end of the world. We just screwed up. Absolutely boneheaded mood yesterday. Shouldn't have paused it. Johnson & Johnson's back out there. We're standing by the vaccine. We're standing by the approval. We're not going to screw up. By the way, everybody get a vaccine. Go get it. That's what they need to do. David in North Carolina. Hi, David.
Hey, Hugh. I do not understand how you can still say that you're a fan of Fauci, that you love this
Well,
guy.
okay, but let's go to vaccine. I don't want to argue about Fauci. I want to argue about Johnson & Johnson. Are you vaccinated? I don't want to argue about Fauci. We disagree. I like Fauci. I trust him. I believe in him. You don't, but I want to talk about the vaccine. Have you gotten one yet?
Yeah, Moderna.
Good for you, man. Keep going. Rob in Virginia. Hey, Rob.
Good morning, Hugh. Good show as always. I just wanted to call and thank you for lifting up the corner of the tent and let us look at how journalism really works. When you asked the guy from the New York Times if he saw the Sebastian Gorka or listened to it, he said, "No, I don't listen to Gorka." Thanks. Glad he's so well informed on all.
Well, Michael's a good reporter. I assume that's because he's at work. You know, I only hear Seb when I'm driving. Honestly, I work from 6 to 9. I do show prep every morning for an hour before, and then at night I do 2 hours. So I don't watch cable news. That's not a rap on cable news. I just don't watch it. I can't let it interfere with my show prep. So I think Michael's working. Seb's on in the afternoon in Virginia.
I wasn't rapping anybody except for the fact I thought he was a journalist, and I thought journalists collected information on all sides of issues.
I'm surprised he didn't know. I'm surprised he did not know that Trump was on Seb's show yesterday. I'm not surprised he doesn't listen to talk radio in the afternoon. I am surprised he did not know that Trump was on Gorka, because that's news, and I think Seb pushed it out pretty hard. So that I'll give you that. Thank you, my friend. Lou in San Antonio. K-Loop.
Hey, Hugh, thanks a lot for taking my call. I just want to comment on what you said about the J&J vaccine. I do not plan to get it. I'm a 66-year-old healthy woman. My doctor is 48 years old, primary care. She works in a COVID unit, and she told me very recently if I wanted to get it, I could. But she also told me, of course, she works in a COVID unit. She's a primary care provider. But she told me that none of us, not the FDA, not the drug companies, not you, not me, not anybody, is going to know the full impact of this experimental process of the vaccine.
Lou, I get where you're going. I've got to get to my ad, but I want to tell you this. Your primary care doctor, if they told you to do anything other than get vaccinated, did you a disservice. And you need to go get vaccinated because you're 66 and you're in the target zone, and I want you to live a long time and be healthy. You need to go get vaccinated. Find another primary care doctor if they told you not to get vaccinated. It's that simple. I got to tell you about ReliefFactor.com, America. I love people. I love all my callers, but I do have to take care of my sponsors, and ReliefFactor.com is a sponsor. The biggest headline of the day, as far as I'm concerned, is that if you exercise, your chances of getting and dying from COVID just plummet. If you are active, and by active, they don't mean running a marathon. They mean 150 minutes a week of exercise. That's 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week with a couple of days off. Can you take a walk for 30 minutes? After I finish talking with Admiral McRaven, I'm doing 90 minutes today, hour and a half, 6 miles. And that's more time than I need. That includes prep time and cool down time. Why? Because I want to stay alive as long as I can. And you do too. And I recover from it because of ReliefFactor.com, which is support for the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that come with exercise and aging. Go get it at ReliefFactor.com. Come back for Admiral McRaven next.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
I will ask for your reaction to the president's promise that nothing he recommended impinges on the Second Amendment.
Well, it is a very, I guess, unique interpretation of what the Second Amendment is then. If we're looking at the infringement upon the Second Amendment and the government trying to pass any kind of restrictions on that, I certainly think there's an argument to be said that if he's passing the idea that you can no longer build a firearm in your home, which has always been legal in America, even before the founding of our nation, you could build a firearm in your home. If he's now saying you can't do that, well, I would argue that we're looking at an infringement upon Second Amendment rights. If he's talking about reclassifying an entire class of pistols under the National Firearms Act, which would make it so you couldn't possess these firearms unless you submit your photo, you submit your fingerprints, you pay a $200 tax stamp, and undergo extensive background checks through the ATF, and then be put on a government watch list simply for exercising your Second Amendment rights. I think that that's called an infringement upon your rights, and I think that's something that the American public needs to reach out to their members of Congress and remind them that they are the check on the executive branch. The legislative branch then is one of the checks to keep the executive branch within their role and make sure that they're not overreaching.
Which is precisely why Biden wants to use executive orders. He wants to do an end around, and he wants to try to avoid the legislative process, because the legislative process is ultimately the way the American people can push back against restrictions, constitutional restrictions like this.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Calling new Biden legislation an infrastructure plan is like calling a shark a dolphin. They both may have dorsal fins, but you mistake one for the other at your peril. Don't be fooled. Only 5% of the bill's spending would actually go for roads and bridges, what normal people think of as infrastructure. Add in items like Amtrak and broadband, and you're still only at 30% of the eye-popping total of $2.3 trillion. And you're supposed to pay for all of this with the biggest tax increase since 1968. Here's what's worse. The bill is actually about leftist social engineering. It would end right to work, something the left hates because it guarantees no one can be forced to join a union or pay union dues in order to hold a job. Ending it offers a rich new source of campaign contributions for Democrats. Calling a shark a dolphin doesn't make it one. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Woodrow Wilson was more concerned with his legacy than what was right for America. he believed the founding fathers were misled. He was the first president in American history to actually philosophically and politically challenge the beliefs of the founding fathers. Woodrow Wilson and Joe Biden are very similar. They care about a radical restructuring and redefinition of America, and I'm going to say something controversial that I have not said publicly. You ready for this?
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I'm opening up with the theme song from The Alamo, my favorite movie as a child, because Colonel Travis is in it, and he's also in this book, which I'm holding up on my iPad, The Hero Code by Admiral William McRaven. Admiral McRaven, it is great to see you again. 37 years of SEAL, former commander of all special forces, best-selling New York Times author. And Admiral, I got to tell you, I like the Hero Code so much, I did something very rare for a talk show host. I bought it myself, my own money. That never happens in my business.
Here.
It's a completely one-off, and your buddy McChrystal is going to say, wait a minute, I had to give him my book, and I just knew it would be a good thing. It's good to see you, Admiral. Congratulations on the Hero Code. It's a wonderful, wonderful read. It's a perfect graduation book. But mostly I want to begin with, I want to cover it all. We got time. We're not pressed. I want to start with your wonderful doctor, Dr. Michael Keating, who I want to be my doctor if I ever get anything that needs a cancer specialist. Tell the audience about Dr. Keating, and especially on the day after the president announces we're leaving Afghanistan, he gives you the news that you're not going to die. And then your second question is, can I go back to Afghanistan? Tell people about him.
Yeah, so a little bit of background. In 2010, I was diagnosed with chronic lymphocytic leukemia, which, you know, as far as cancers go, it's not the worst of cancers, but anytime you get a cancer diagnosis, it obviously it scares you. But their initial prognosis was going to call for me to come back from Afghanistan. I was in Afghanistan when I got the diagnosis. Come back, get my spleen taken out, you know, start a whole lot of chemotherapy, clearly going to affect my long-term career viability in my life, frankly. But my wife ended up getting an appointment at MD Anderson Clinic in Texas. So we went back there. And as I tell in the story, you know, when you walk into a cancer clinic, you see these people that are battling cancer, and it is tough. I mean, it is tough to see what they're going through. And frankly, I was pretty depressed. I mean, I was down. I knew that the way things looked, my career was probably over. My life was going to change dramatically. And I walk into this the doctor's office. My wife and I are waiting, and you know, I'm thinking about all the terrible things that could happen. All of a sudden, the door flies open, and in walks this kind of ruddy-faced Australian, and he goes, "Hey, mate, give me a hug." Well, I'm not a hugger, Hugh. You know,
Neither am I. I'm a Presbyterian.
I'll give him a hug, you know. So I gave him a hug, and he said, "You're going to be fine." And I was stunned. And he turns to my wife, and he says, "So you're the wife?" And she nods, and he says, "Well, you don't need to start looking for a new boyfriend. He's going to be just fine." And I said, I'm sorry, Doc, I don't get it. And he said, well, look, he said the initial prognosis was correct, but we have new medicine, new procedures now. And the point of the story was, I walked out of that room. I walked out of that room with hope. And the power of hope is, you know, as you well know, Hugh, I mean, it is the most powerful force in the world. When you have hope, you can get over all these difficult, challenging times. And Michael Keating had this great sense of humor, this great abundance of an ability to give people hope, and he certainly did for me.
I'm going to remember all these stories because your collection of stories is very well curated, but I'm going to remember Dr. Keating, and this is part of the Hero Code, which is give hope every day to everyone you can, which I believe is, I'm going to paraphrase the Hero Code. People have to get the book if they want the exact writing of it. I think that's so important that people be lifting up rather than crushing down. Now, tell me something that's not in the book, Admiral. I know from my SEAL buddies, friends of yours that we have in common, that you do a hot wash after every operation. So if it goes bad, how do you both correct the error and yet give the hope back that it's not going to happen again?
Yeah, great question. You know, one of the things we do in the special operations community, I think, as well as any other military unit, is we have these, as you point out, these kind of hot washes after every single mission. I mean, we review every single aspect of the mission. And when it doesn't go well, you have to be able to correct it because people's lives are on the line. And frankly, you kind of take off the collar devices. So, the Army captains and the privates and the admirals are all kind of equal value when it comes to critiquing how the mission went. So you get a chance to kind of get it off your chest, to focus on the issues that you think need to be corrected. But at the end of the day, you got to say, hey, boys, we got to get up and go out tomorrow. So put this one behind you, learn the lessons, learn how to correct the mistakes, and let's get on with it. You can't beat yourself up too bad. The most important thing is fix it, and we'll be better the next time. And that's the aspect of hope. We will be better the next time if we correct the mistakes on this mission.
So, Admiral, I did mention at the beginning, I'll go back to the hero code shortly, but I did want your reaction to President Biden's announcement yesterday. We're out of Afghanistan on 9/11. I don't like the timing. I don't like leaving Bagram completely, but what was your reaction?
Yeah, I was not surprised, Hugh. I mean, the fact of the matter is that this administration has come to the decision that we cannot win the war in Afghanistan militarily. And that, candidly, after 20 years, I mean, that's probably the correct assessment. Now, the timing, what I do know is that the president has consulted with the military leaders, Scott Miller, who's the ISAF commander in Afghanistan, General Frank McKenzie, who's the CENTCOM commander, of course, Mark Milley and Secretary Austin. All four of these guys have extensive experience in Afghanistan. And so as a military leader, the most important thing you want is your advice and counsel to be heard. It doesn't have to be taken every time, but you have to have the opportunity to have a good hearing and to let the president, in this case, think through. Because I know they told the president about all the potential things that could happen if we left. And when the president, of course, makes a decision, we're a professional military. Our job is to say, once we've had a chance to argue it out, the president makes a decision, we say, yes, sir. And then we move out and do what the American public asks us to do. But the other thing to remember is, you take a look over the last 20 years, we have not had an attack on the United States in the last 20 years, not since 9/11. We have, while we were in Afghanistan, we built a security force of about, 350,000 Afghans. So hopefully we will leave the Afghans in a better security position than what they